In this episode of Watching the Watchers, we're talking about Kyle Rittenhouse, day one of the trial. Of course, this is a big case that a lot of people are paying attention to, including us. A lot of our coverage on this channel has been about the Kyle Rittenhouse case, and so we're going to be taking a deep dive into it. Day one, we're going to be looking at what happened in court today. Court's judge's name is Bruce Schroeder, and it was a big Bruce Schroeder day today. He was giving us a lot of the details about how the trial is going to unfold, looking like 2 weeks of trial. Today, we're right in the middle of jury selection, and so we have several clips of the judge explaining how this is all going to work, how jury selection is going to unfold, and then clips of actually the two different attorneys who are doing the questioning, one for the prosecution, Thomas Binger, and the defense attorney, Corey Chirafisi, were asking questions of the various jurors today, and we've got a bunch of different clips of them. So we'll go through that. Not super interesting, but we are going to be getting our bearings straight on this case. We're going to be spending the next 2 weeks or so covering this in depth, and so we got to make sure that we've got our framework in order. Then we're going to change gears. In our second segment, we're going to be looking at Alec Baldwin. Over the weekend, he came out and gave this, I think it was spontaneous, or it was supposed to be spontaneous, this little press conference, this sort of, he was being chased around by some media people, pulled over on the side of the road, went out and had a conversation with these people who were following him. And so even though it was about a 3-minute conversation, we do have a transcript and we can go through it and see what he was talking about here and see if we can glean out from this any of his defenses, of course, as they pertain to the Rust shooting. So we're going to talk about that. And then in our third segment, we are right up against the clock on some hard deadlines for vaccine mandates that are being imposed all across the country. And so we're going to check in on those. Out of New York City, FDNY, they've closed like 26 firehouses in New York City. So 26 fire departments closed because of a self-imposed mandate. We'll check in with them. We'll check in with the U.S. prisons that are facing staffing shortages. We're going to check in with Los Angeles County, saying that their sheriffs are going to be gone with the wind. And then, of course, we're going to take our eyes over to the Marine Corps because they're about to boot out a bunch of Marines if they don't bend the knee, like is expected in this administration. And so if you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. All right, so the form looks like this. Rittenhouse jury selection, Baldwin public statement, and the New York Fire Department and the Marines exodus. That's the form to use if you are over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. If you're a supporter there, use that form. We're going to go ahead and take your questions as they come in, and it's very helpful if you keep them in order of the segments. Otherwise, I kind of just got to skip over it. So it is watchingthewatchers.locals.com is a place to be if you want to be a part of the show. The live stream, of course, 4 o'clock Arizona time every day, weekday, and the clips, those all get uploaded over here. Robert Gruller ESQ clips on YouTube. Okay, so I think we've got all the what's the word? Clerical work, housekeeping. All the housekeeping is in order, which means we can go ahead and get started with the actual show. Kyle Rittenhouse trial today started, day one, jury selection. We're going to be covering this in depth. We've spent a lot of time talking about Kyle Rittenhouse's case. In fact, the big reason this channel is as successful as it ever has been is because of Kyle Rittenhouse. We did a very deep dive back in August when this happened and made a very strong case, in my opinion, my humble opinion as a defense lawyer, for why this was self-defense. And so we're going to be covering this in depth. I think it's a very important case for the concept of self-defense that exists fundamentally in our concept of law here as Americans. So I want to start off by making sure we have our foundation in order. Let's take a look at the trial board. We can see here we've got all the relevant parties in order. And since we've been following this case, this has continued to fill out. It will continue to fill out. But let's run through and make sure we've got our housekeeping in order. Kyle Rittenhouse over here, we can see he is the defendant, so we're going to put him on the right. We've got Mark Richards, his attorney. We've got Corey Chirafisi, who is his defense attorney, or Chirafisi. I'm going to say that wrong throughout the entirety of the trial, but he did a lot of the questioning today. Today was jury selection, and Mr. Chirafisi did most of the voir dire for the defense. We saw Dr. John Black was an expert witness that the defense proffered forward. We'll probably see him in the trial when the defense presents their case, but we're not real sure yet. On the left, we've got Thomas Binger. He's the prosecutor. You can see him in this beautiful photograph. He is joined by his assistant prosecutor, James Kraus, also goes by Jim. Very nice guy, Jim. Jim Gage Kroskutz is also the assailant or the victim, right? So this is one of the victims. He is still alive, and so I put him up top here near the prosecutors because he's going to be sort of, communicating with them. He's sort of the only living victim who was shot. So then beneath him, we've got Anthony Huber, who is deceased, who was the skateboarder over here. I have a different photograph of him as we progress. And then we have Joseph Rosenbaum. Joseph Rosenbaum was sort of the first person who was shot in the altercation when Kyle was sort of running away, in my opinion. Other people might say that he was provoking the running before he turned around and shot Rosenbaum. We also have Richard McGinnis. Could not find a good photograph of him, so I didn't want to use an incorrect photo. Richard McGinnis was one of the reporters who had a conversation with Kyle. We have unknown person, don't have an identity on this person, but he is in the charges, as we're going to see. And then we've got Mr. Robert Willis. We heard from him earlier. Don't think he's going to be relevant. His picture's probably going away soon, but he was part of the prosecution that was an expert witness that they were going to potentially bring forward. And so we've got some new additions here. We added Richard McGinnis. We added the unknown person. We added the jurors down here at the bottom. And so we are going to be looking at 20 jurors, as you can see. This is something that the judge has indicated. And so we'll go through this, right? We're going to be in jury selection today and tomorrow, and he said he wanted to get it done in one day. We'll see if he gets it done tomorrow, but it may, bleed into a third day because this is a case that every single person has heard about. He actually had a line of questioning today when he was talking to the jurors. Judge Schroeder said, anybody here, how about, rather than have you heard about the case, anybody here not heard of it? No hands. Right, so everybody knew what was going on. Let's take a quick look at the charges. This is from the court's docket. I pulled this today. Wanted to make sure we had the correct charges in order. And you can see here, they actually did jockey around a little bit. They moved some of the charges around. It doesn't matter. Here, what we're looking at, first-degree reckless homicide, endangerment, reckless endangerment, intentional homicide, attempted intentional homicide, and then possession of a dangerous weapon. This is all the sort of the complicated statutes, modifiers, all of that. Here's really what we're looking at when you break it down to the nuts and bolts. First-degree homicide, right? This was reckless homicide. This is for Joseph Rosenbaum. And so each charge connects to one particular victim, as we're going to see. Then we have reckless endangerment. That was Richard McGinnis. That was the reporter. The reporter was not shot or killed, but he was really behind Rosenbaum when Kyle shot Rosenbaum. And so, some of the bullets, presumably sort of whizzed past Richard McGinnis, which is what prompted the reckless endangerment charge. He was endangered. Kyle Rittenhouse allegedly was reckless. That's what justifies that charge. There was another unknown person who was also presumably sort of in the line of fire, and so also a reckless endangerment for that individual. Then we have intentional homicide, right? And we have reckless homicide, then we have intentional homicide. Now, this was after the fact. This is when Anthony Huber, this was also the skateboarder that we saw here in this photograph, who was sort of swinging the skateboard. This is his separate photograph, and you can see intentional homicide is count 4, saying that Rittenhouse intentionally shot and killed him, which he did, right? He actually did shoot and kill him. But the allegation here, or the defense, is self-defense, that he did intend to take a gun and shoot and point it and pull the trigger, but it was a justified killing. It was a justified shooting. So then we have count 5, attempted intentional homicide, Gage Grosskreutz. The other, this is inaccurate. This is not deceased, so I'll fix that. He is still alive. He is he got shot in the elbow, essentially. A lot of damage to his arm, but he is still alive. And then count 6, possession of a weapon. So we're going to be paying most attention to these charges. There was a 7th count, something for disobeying a curfew violation. There was some sort of public order law that was in place that technically they charged him with, but it's not it's not really relevant, if I can be so frank. Okay, so let's get into the actual clips. Now that we have our bearing straight, our backbone, not going to do this every day, just wanted to get our bearing straight about where this is all starting, and then we're going to dive in on this. When we get expert witnesses or additional witnesses or whomever is going to be testifying, we're going to bring them in, add them to the board, make sure that we categorize them, and we're also going to do the same thing with the jurors, at least as far as we can, given the information that is provided to us, which is going to be a little bit different. Here on this channel, we spent a lot of time on the Derek Chauvin case, and if you recall, we had a lot of information about those jurors. because they had individualized voir dire. They got questioned individually, one by one. And so we're going to get less information in this trial because presumably we're not going to be doing that. Well, we'll see where this goes. But the point here is we're going to break this down bit by bit. We're going to start off by getting our bearing straight from the judge. This is Judge Schroeder, who was in court today laying out what the next 2 weeks are going to look like. Here he is.
But you should count on being in this building, in the jury room, for the duration of the trial. So that's number one. And number two is the duration of the trial. There is I'm going to place it at well under 1 in 100, a less than a 1% chance that for some reason I would order during the trial that you would be sequestered, which would mean that you would be housed in a hotel at night in individual rooms, and you'd be provided with all of your meals all day long. You'd have limited access to television and internet and that type of thing. But I have not done that since I was statutorily required to do so. When I started in the system 50 years ago, on a case of this nature, the jury was required to be sequestered. So I'm familiar with the process, and I know how onerous it is. And so I will resist it in every way I can. But I can't rule it out entirely. As I say, I'm being very honest with you when I tell you there is less than a 1% chance in my estimation that we would come to that. But I don't want to spring it on you suddenly. That's pretty painful.
Okay, so jury sequestration, 1 in 100, very small likelihood of that. But he does say length of the trial, about 2 weeks. Maybe 2 days, plus or minus 2 days. Starts at 9 a.m. If you listen to the whole spiel, he goes at right 9 a.m. We're going to go to lunch, going to have a lunch break, going to take a break in the morning, break in the afternoon, come on back down in the afternoon, and then we're going to get right all the way back to it until about 4:30 or 5 every day for the next 2 weeks. And so he's sort of, giving the jury a big, discussion about how all this works, because for most people, they've never sat on a jury before. This is the first time in court. They've never been charged with a crime. They don't know how any of this stuff works. And so it's sort of an educating the jury about this big, long road you're about to be going down. And so brace yourselves. He outlines for us that we're going to have 20 jurors. And so a lot of people go, 20 jurors? That's a lot of jurors. What are you talking about? On other juries, people are used to saying, 8 or 12, sort of a lower number where you don't have this many seats. And so he's going to explain why it is so big. And it is interesting. They're sort of working in reverse. So, right, this is a 20-person jury panel. Normally, you're going to have 12. Some states don't even have juries for, lower level offenses, but maybe 6 plus 1 for a 7, and it just sort of varies. 20 is a very, very big number. And what you can see from this judge is he explains how it works here. And so let's listen in. This is Judge Schroeder on voir dire. Here he is.
You're probably wondering, what's he talking about? 20 jurors? Who ever heard of that? And you hear on television sometimes they'll talk about alternate jurors. We don't have any alternates. Everybody who is picked is a full-fledged juror. The selection process takes place at the end. If, when we go to verdict, when we go to deliberation, at the end of the trial, if there are more than 12 jurors, then we will strike off whatever number is necessary to get down to that number. So maybe it'll be 8, maybe it'll be 2. We don't know yet. It depends on if there's any family emergencies or illnesses that mean that we have to discharge a juror.
Okay, so again, not super interesting, right? But it's the nuts and bolts of how this works. So we're going to get to 20. Then we're going to work our way back down to 12 when the time has come, because something might happen, right? It's a 2-week trial. And so if you get 20 people on there, well, somebody's going to get sick. Might be a COVID infection somewhere, right? Something might go wrong. You might have Maxine Waters from California come parachuting in there, causing a bunch of ruckus. So you never know what can happen. And so they're going to get a full 20. They only need 12. So they're going to work their way back down. Now, in previous coverage on this channel, when we talked about Derek Chauvin, we put together a table that looks something like this. You may remember that we had the different emojis symbolizing all the different jurors. We had the race, the sex, the age, the profession. We took various notes about all of them. And we didn't get any detail about any of that today, because the way that this process worked for voir dire, which is the questioning of the jurors, what happened was they did it a little bit differently than Chauvin. So in Chauvin, what happened was they sent out questionnaires, right? They said, did you ever attend a protest for racial injustice or something like that? And if somebody marked yes, they would call those jurors in and say, juror 13, did you ever do anything that was in question? It said you did you? And they say, yes, I did. Well, can you set that aside and be fair and impartial? Yes, I can. But there was a big lead up into that, right? They'd say, well, what do you do? Oh, I'm a nurse. I teach elementary school. I raise puppies, whatever. And we got to know the person. And there were people in the courtroom that would then also be watching that line of questioning. And they'd say, okay, well, that was a white woman in her 40s. And we would be able to sort of glean together what the jury looked like. That's not what happened here today. We had sort of a big panel, full of 80 to 100 people, and we couldn't see any of it. I was not there, but the reports say about 70 to 80 people, and they would be sort of asked as a panel, big group questions. For example, one we're going to get to is, does anybody have any trepidation, any concerns about the word AR-15 or about, assault weapon or something like that? If you heard that Kyle Rittenhouse had an assault weapon, would that automatically lead you to be prejudicial against him? Would you find that he is guilty just due to the fact that he had an assault weapon? Because that's very scary to a lot of people, right? Just the fact that somebody might have an AR-15 or an assault rifle or whatever is sort of indoctrinated into their head that thing is, that might cause them to think that's a terrorist, that's a murderer, that's a white, whatever, even though it's a perfectly legal gun. And so they ask that question to everybody, and then they raise their hands. So juror 35 raises their hand, says, yes, that gun is very scary to me. And then they get to ask some questions about that one particular person, that one issue, but you lose a lot of the other inquisition of that person, right? Well, okay, so you get one answer about that, but is that a teacher? Is that a nurse, a doctor, a mother, somebody who is in construction? Do they draw? What do they do? We don't know. And so it's harder and harder to put this together. We really don't know what the makeup of the jury is at this point, but we do have some generalizations that we can gather. Here we have somebody named Proof and Hearsay on Twitter. They say, of the 70 or so potential jurors in the courtroom for the Rittenhouse trial, so 70 people in there as part of the big panel, there are 3 black women, 1 Hispanic man, rest mostly older, white group. Rittenhouse, shout out to Mayan Silver of a news agency, pooling for reporters who did not win the lottery for seats inside the courtroom, right? So super limited in there. And so only a certain number of people can see what is actually going on, so somebody reports those numbers. And so you can see, right, okay, we're getting some demographics. We can see some of that. Now, in this case is interesting because it has sort of this racial component to it, even though it's all white people on the board, right? Kyle Rittenhouse shot white people. Apparently they were there protesting as part of BLM or for racial injustice or something, but I don't, who knows what was going on back in those days. So now what we have here is a little bit of a speech from this judge. And, this is useful in that it gives you some idea, some insight into the judge, right? A lot of people will look at this or listen to this and, oh gosh, it's just a judge meandering off to himself, which is true, right? This judge is very sort of loose, the way that he navigates through the courtroom. It's very organic, not a lot of structure to it. I got very frustrated during some of the pretrial proceedings. And even defense lawyer Corey Chirafisi was a little bit frustrated. The judge was asking questions and then sort of meandered into arguing about the motions in limine. So like sort of talking about one issue about expert witnesses and Daubert hearings, and then meandering into like a segue into a motion in limine conversation. And we're all just going, what? And then Corey Chirafisi says, are we arguing the motions in limine now? And judge goes, yeah, I think we are. I go, oh, okay, well, I guess we're number 13 then. Dials back to number 13. And you're going, all right, well, that's one way to do it. So just kind of navigating throughout, just kind of, organically. His courtroom, he can run it however he wants to. But I also think it's important to listen to the judge and sort of gather what he talks about, see if you can gain some insight into what he's talking about. And here, if you listen to this judge a lot this morning, There was a quick moment where he sort of asked everybody to applaud for the veterans, right? Anybody here served? Yes, we all did. Stand up. Okay, give him a round of applause, which, he doesn't have to do that. That's not anything that's required. Shows you that he's somebody who is probably, leaning one direction versus another, right? So people who show support for the troops, kind of stand up and honor them, tend to, broad strokes, fall into one political category, into one bigger political category when it comes to gun rights and things like that. And so take from that what you will, right? That's why it's important to listen to these things. And here is where he's giving the speech. Nothing really, red meat in this, other than the fact he's sort of showing some reverence for the founders, talking about the importance of jury selection and that the founders were very firm that this is integral to our democracy. Here he is.
The founders of our country were very firm about what was going to go into that Bill of Rights that was passed at the first Congress. And one of the ingredients was trial by jury. They wanted to protect that. It's in the Constitution, the basic law of this country. And it was carried over into the states so that both under the federal and the state constitution, people have a right to a trial by jury. And that's why you're here today. They put another provision in the Constitution entitled, the title isn't important. It is for a fair and impartial jury. That's an obligation that they imposed on you. These are people who had risked everything, their lives, as they said themselves in the Declaration of Independence, their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. They pledged all of that, and they literally did. This was a capital offense when they rebelled against their lawful king. And gruesome execution. The forfeiture of all their property. There was something called corruption of blood, where not only were they disinherited, but their children. They would lose everything. And their sacred honor. Now, there's honorable people in this world today, but I don't think it gets the attention that it did in a former era.
That's right, Judge. You're right. Yeah, and so it was a lot of that today, right? So about the first, it felt like maybe 20 minutes of this speech, he was going back through Rome, and he was going back through, the Middle Ages and the history of, what a complaint means, and a really detailed soliloquy that, lasted a long time. And it was, it was just interesting to sort of watch him just go. And you could tell he's been given this speech for a long time. He had a lot to say about it. This is a big case of, national importance. And so he went into details about where he stands and, his perspective on all of this. Okay, so that's the judge, right? We're not going to be hearing much more from him as the rest of the trial goes on. Ideally, right, the judge really should not be involved other than just, resolving disputes. And so that was our introduction to him. We're going to move on past the judge and hopefully into, some real substantive stuff as soon as we get the jury seated, but we're not there yet. And so let's take a quick listen in at some of the arguments that are taking place surrounding jury selection. So once again, voir dire, this is actually, asking questions, and the format of what we're about to see is a little bit boring. We're going to be looking at the judge all day unless they move this camera around. We're just going to be, I guess, maybe listening to the judge all trial, or at least throughout jury selection. But we have Prosecutor Thomas Binger, and he's asking questions. So once again, we go through the questions, sort of the general questions that are applicable to anybody in the panel. So picture yourself, you're one of 100 people. They bring you into a room. They start asking you questions. Is anybody here, lost a loved one in a shooting? Right? Everybody raised, so the 5 people raised their hand. Wow. Okay. Those people probably not going to be asked to sit on this jury. For many reasons, right? Prosecutors may not want them on there because they're too emotional. We could have defense attorneys may not want them on there because they're overly critical. To people who are just too emotionally invested, you might just remove some of them. And so we're sort of at that stage where they're asking big, broad, general questions. Somebody raises their cue card. Oh, that's me. That's my question. And then they dive in on that person a little bit further. Okay, so you said that somebody that you know or love was shot in an incident, but with that being said, can you set that aside and still be fair and impartial? And so you're sort of trying to identify people who might be a problem, see if you can rehabilitate them to bring them back into a competent, capable, reasonable juror, and if not, then they've got to go. And so here is Thomas Binger. Here's the prosecutor. He started with the questioning this morning, and this first question was sort of about trying to gauge whether individual jurors were surrounded by other people who had strong opinions about this case. So if you're a juror He's asking you, is there anybody in your life, any family, any friends that is really just aggressive in their perspective on how this case went down? Yes or no? Here's Thomas Binger, and here's what that question sounds like.
So my question is there any one of you who feels that you're in a group of friends or family, or you've got people that you know who are just so dead set on one side or the other of this case that you'd be afraid to make a decision in this trial and then have to face them, have to go home at the end, and they're confronting you with, well, why did you find this, that, or the other thing when, we disagree with that? Is there anybody who would be uncomfortable, who'd be worried about the consequences of making a decision in this case because you're worried it might be unpopular with the people that you know? Okay, ma'am, I think you are juror number 15, is that right?
Okay, so I wanted to just point this question out, right? You can kind of see what he's asking for. He's asking for people who have a strong opinion in this area. He knows the area, and he's saying, might this be problematic for you because your strong opinion is going to go against your support system? It's going to go against your family, against your friends, against your drinking buddies, or your golfing bros, or your bowling team, or whatever it is you do. If you go back to your shooting club and you tell your shooting buddies, yeah, we just convicted Kyle Rittenhouse, how's that going to go for you, right? What the prosecutor's trying to do is identify those people that have those strong external pressures to go one way, probably presuming that he knows what the demographics are in this area that are likely to be probably on the side of Kyle Rittenhouse. And what he's trying to do is identify people that are going to succumb to that peer pressure in one way, shape, or form. So he's asking that question. People are raising their hands. Yes, I've got a lot of social pressure and stuff that is going to cause me to, not think freely. It's going to cause me to succumb to that pressure. He's trying to identify those people and probably boot them out. All right. And so in response to this question, we have here one woman who identified and raised her hand. And she said, yeah, actually, a very similar question. This was actually a different question, but something to the effect of, well, what about close family and friends, or anything that is going to cause you to be, make it difficult for you to be seated on this jury because of the tension surrounding this case? Woman raises her hand and says, yeah, we got Thanksgiving coming up. And, my nephew, well, here, listen in. Here's what she has to say. Thomas Binger asks her, any problems? Here she is.
I believe that juror number 31, did you raise your hand, ma'am? Okay, thank you.
Well, yeah, number 31. I won't want to be hosting Thanksgiving, which I've done in the past, especially with my family.
Okay, real quick, I forgot to mention this. Audio is really low for the jurors, almost non-existent. So I actually edited these a little bit. I boosted the volume and I transcribed it at the bottom. I'm not going to talk over it, but if you're listening in, it's going to be very faint. But if you're watching, you can read the captions down at the bottom of the screen. Here it is again. So she's talking about Thanksgiving, especially with her family.
Attending, and then my nephew, who was a police officer and now has PTSD over many of these situations. It's just very difficult in that regard. Would it make me be impartial? No. But it will make it a very uncomfortable Thanksgiving.
Okay. And I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You are concerned that if you're a juror and you make a decision one way or the other in this case, that it could cause some discomfort, some awkward interactions with family at the holidays. Is that fair to say?
Yes, because of the reasons why he left the police.
Okay. And I believe you said that, I think you meant to say that it would not affect your ability to be impartial, but it would be something that would be weighing in your mind. Is that fair to say?
Okay. So you could see what he was trying to get at, and then she kind of gave him the opposite of that. So if you didn't hear her, that audio was bad. But if you didn't hear her, she said, well, my nephew might be coming over for Thanksgiving. He used to be a police officer. He has PTSD for many of these situations. And now you're thinking, okay, right, as a prosecutor, well, do I want this lady on the jury or not? Her nephew's police family, so she might be pro law enforcement, but Kyle Rittenhouse is this might be a kind of a pro law enforcement case. As a defendant, he's kind of a likable law enforcement candidate. He was out there and law enforcement said, we appreciate you guys, and so maybe they might be aligning with him. So as a prosecutor, you're trying to decide, is this a police family, somebody we want on there or not? And so he kind of gets into it. Okay, well, so your nephew used to be a police officer. Can you still sit on this jury? Yes, I can. Can you exercise your civic duty over having a problem at Thanksgiving dinner? Yes, I can. Okay. Right. So she gets to stick around for the foreseeable future. But that's the type of stuff we're talking about, right? Thanksgiving dinner, problems arguing over Kyle Rittenhouse, which is valid to be fair, right? I don't know what I'm doing for Thanksgiving, but somebody's probably going to get a black eye over Kyle Rittenhouse, right? Not on my hands. I'm very peaceful and loving, but you just know how this stuff goes. It's a tense case. And so we've got another clip here. We got two from Thomas Binger. Let's check in here on Corey Chirafisi. And Chirafisi, of course, is a defense attorney, and he's asking another question, diving in about one particular mom. We have a mom who is a juror. Again, her voice is going to be very low, but I did my best to transcribe this briefly. And she's going to be asked a question by Chirafisi specifically. You said something about not wanting your son to go down there to the scene where Rittenhouse was, where Rosenbaum was, where all of this took place. The prosecutor said, wanted to know about that because wanted to know why you didn't want your son to go down there, probably because it would have been a reckless thing to do if your son went down there. But then the defense is hinting that the mom was more concerned about safety. The reason why she didn't want her son to go down there is because it was dangerous. And in a dangerous situation, what do you have to do? Defend yourself. So you can see the prosecutor was going one direction and the defense attorney comes back out and tries to redirect it. Let's listen to that question.
He was 19 at the time.
Okay. And you had mentioned that you were you had asked him not to do that.
Exactly.
Okay. Can I ask you, it's a broad question, but why? Were you worried for his safety? Did you not want him to get arrested? Kind of all of it? What was kind of going through your mind?
Mostly his safety, not knowing what was going on down there, and I'm just kind of the type of person to lock up and stay home and be safe and protect my own and not go look for any trouble.
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
Sorry, Judge. Were you watching what was happening?
Yes.
All right. And so you had observed property damage, things like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Fires that were going on.
Okay. And so the biggest concern you had was for his safety?
Yes. I just didn't think he needed to be any part of it.
Okay.
Okay, so you see what he did there? So let's back up for a minute. We have a woman out there. Prosecutor asks him a question. You don't want your son to go down there. Why not? Well, it's dangerous down there. He goes, exactly right. So so prosecutor's argument, the framing of this, the reason why mom didn't want son to go down there, it's dangerous. And Kyle Rittenhouse, by grabbing a gun and going down there, is acting recklessly, right? This mom can see it's very clearly dangerous, but Rittenhouse goes down there anyways. Kind of sounds like it was reckless behavior, right? That's the prosecutor's argument. Defense attorney comes back out and says, yeah, but you were talking about dangerousness, but the real reason you didn't want him to go down there was safety, right? Just flips it from dangerous to safety. Safety, right? You didn't want, it's safe. You want him to be safe. And that's going to be reframed as to be self-defense, right? It wasn't reckless for him to go down there. That was fine. All that was fine. He was very safe until he was assaulted and attacked. And then because his safety was in danger, he needed to exercise self-defense, fire his weapon, and eliminate the threats. And my sign literally just fell off the wall. Did you see that happen? Live? What? What? All right. Well, going to say my prayers tonight extra deeply. Might be some demons in the room or something going on there. Gonna have to look at that. The R&R sign, the thing right in the middle, just fell live right in the middle of the show. What the heck was that? All right, well, I don't know what that says about Kyle Rittenhouse's case, but it might be a good omen, might not be a good omen. What did I say? I'm gonna have to go rewind the clock there. Okay, all right. Well, what the heck was I talking about? It's probably a pretty damn good point. It was earth-shattering point that I was making right there. All right, let's get back to it. All right. So I was talking about this prosecutor and the arguments that were being made. Prosecutor said that was reckless. Defense attorney says, no, it was a concern about safety. Kyle Rittenhouse is now defending himself to provide for his own safety. So a sort of a reframe of that argument. And I thought it was pretty effective there from Chirafisi. Also, this is the question now. We're going to hear from this juror gets excused. So Kyle Rittenhouse, in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, I don't know the number of this juror, but he does get excused because both sides agree that the juror should go. So Corey Chirafisi comes out and asks a question about the AR-15 specifically. If you just hear the word AR-15, are you likely to just presume somebody is guilty just because you don't like the gun? And this woman's like, yeah, I would, totally. It's a scary gun. I don't like it at all. I don't care if it's legal. I don't care if it's perfectly authorized whatsoever. If I see him with it, I think that person did something wrong because I don't like guns. And they were asking that question more or less. Here's how that sounded. Here's Corey. Now, Corey then gets an answer. He's going to ask a question. We're going to pause. We're going to hear her response. And then Corey's going to make a motion to strike her for cause. Now, obviously biased. We can't have her on the jury panel. And what happens is the prosecution gets to come back out and try to rehabilitate the juror to say, well, look, I know that they want to strike you, but you really shouldn't be stricken because it's not that bad because you really believe this, isn't it true? And you also believe that, right? And they say, oh yeah, you're right. I can be fair and impartial. And they rehabilitate you back in to keep you a part of the jury because you want that juror, right? If they're really bad for one side, they're probably pretty good for yours. And so we're going to watch this game sort of start to play itself out, but the prosecution's like, okay, well, I guess we don't want you either then. Bye. So here is where the question starts from Corey, and then we'll move on.
Mr. Binger had asked you about the workings of a firearm. I think you'll hear about the firearm in this case. Okay? The firearm in this case, I think it'll be referred to as an AR-15. It's an MP-15, but it's referred to that. Is anybody so bothered by that type of firearm that they don't think that they could listen to the facts of the case and judge it fairly? Anybody have such a problem with that? Okay. I want to make sure I have it right. I'm not going to have it right. Juror number 30. Okay.
Okay, so juror number 30 raises her hand. Quick question. Anybody see that would sort of jump to conclusions and be unable to be fair and impartial. Juror 30 raises her hands. So then we get an answer from her, and then Corey digs in a little bit before moving to strike her for cause. Judge, she is not capable of being a competent juror. She's got to go. Let's listen.
So yes, I do have a problem with it.
Okay. Can you, I don't want this to sound like a dumb question, but can you just tell me your feelings on it?
I don't think a weapon like that should belong to the general public.
Okay. If it's legal to purchase, and you have your feelings, which are, I'm just going to complain about that. And the firearm in and of itself isn't illegal. Do you think you can judge this case fairly, understanding that it involves a firearm that you don't think should be legal?
No.
Okay. So you think you would have difficulty setting aside whatever preconceived notions or whatever your feelings are about the case and judge it fairly?
Yeah.
Okay. Judge, I would move to strike 30.
Hey,
Okay, so gone, right? So not gone quite yet, but gone from the defense. Defense goes out there. Listen, I'm going to ask you 3 times. If it's perfectly legal for somebody to have that gun, you're still going to look at their case and say, you find them guilty. She says, yes. Are you sure? Again, yes, I would do it again. And he says, why? And she says, well, because I don't think anybody in the public should have a weapon like that. And so somebody is just way too biased, right? If they have that weapon, automatically guilty. And thankfully, the lady said that, right? A lot of people feel that way. Maybe other people would be less honest about it. But fortunately, she said, yep, I have this really strong emotional urge that every time I see that, I'm just like scared to death. She's, recommended that she goes off the panel for cause, right? Because she cannot be fair and impartial. So the judge says, okay, and Mr. Prosecutor, Mr. Binger, why don't you come on up here and let's hear from you. What's your perspective on this? And typically what you'll see is the prosecutor come back out here and try to rehabilitate this person and say, listen, I know that it's sort of a scary thing, but for the sake of this case, right, here in Kenosha, it is perfectly legal for many people to be walking around with an AR-15, right, for example. If they are doing that, and it's not during a riot, it's not during a public disorder, would you be okay with that? Because it's allowed, right? Maybe she goes, oh, you know what? Now that you mentioned it, now that I think about it, yeah, actually, that's not that bad of a problem. He says, because we have the Second Amendment, and the Second Amendment guarantees people the right to have a firearm, right? And she goes, yeah, that's a good point. And sometimes people can have a gun, right? And she goes, yeah, that is true. And so in this case, you could set aside the fact that an AR-15 might be legal and lawful, and that doesn't make you scared of the weapon anymore, right? And she goes, yeah, now that you mention it, that's right. That's true. And he goes, okay, and so you can be fair and impartial? She goes, yes. Okay, Judge, I oppose the motion to strike her for cause. She just said that she could be fair and impartial, and if the judge buys that, right, if the judge is like, oh, she said she could be fair and impartial, then the prosecution just kept a person who's petrified of weapons on the jury panel, right? And that's a tremendous success. And so, that's something that I would think that you'd want to fight for. But we didn't get too much of that here. Now, to be fair, this lady was maybe beyond rehabilitation, but Prosecutor Binger just kind of like, okay, well, all right, you're gone. Kind of surprised me. I was a little bit shocked at how quickly he gave up. It's like 30 seconds. Here he is.
Go ahead.
Ma'am, I just want to clarify something. So there are going to be a lot of facts in this case about a lot of different things. Counsel's asked about the curfew, about the events of that night, protests, things like that. Am I understanding you correctly that just the simple fact that if the evidence shows that the defendant possessed an AR-15, you would find him guilty of all of the charges just based on that fact?
Pretty much.
Okay. Then I have no objection.
What was the answer? Pretty much.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to excuse you. And please give her a note. And
Okay. All right. That's it. No rehabilitation there going on. So what you said is, if the evidence shows that he had an AR-15, you'd find him guilty on all charges. Yeah, pretty much. Okay. Well, thanks for coming here today. See you later. As a prosecutor, I was never a prosecutor, never would ever become a prosecutor. Never. Wouldn't do it. But what happened is you would, I don't know, maybe prosecutors would disagree with me, but you kind of try to salvage that one a little bit, right? You want that person on the jury. That person hates guns. And if you can get him on there, kind of a victory. But he lasted 15, 20 seconds on that one. Anyways, that was more or less day one of the Rittenhouse trial. We're going to be covering this puppy in depth. It's going to get a lot more interesting once we get this jury seated. We get into opening arguments. And so make sure you are subscribed wherever you're watching this and joining us for the live recording of the show and discussion over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Speaking of that, let's jump into the questions over there, my friends. Let's see what you have to say about Rittenhouse. And so we are queuing these puppies up. First in the house, we've got Just Cows is here, says, Rob, I was able to catch this whole stream today. Why would the defense not attempt to dismiss the guy that believes everything firearm related are machine guns towards the very end? It's a good question, Just Cows. So I didn't see that part of it. Why would the defense not attempt to dismiss the guy that believes everything firearm related are machine guns toward the very end? I don't know. I don't know if that's a important distinction between, the various permutations of firearms, semi-automatic, fully automatic. if that matters all that much. To me, it tends to show maybe sort of, ignorance towards firearms, but not necessarily a position on firearms, whether somebody is for or against. So that maybe they just didn't see any real reason why that would lead you to jump to a conclusion one way or the other. Good question. I didn't see that part. Don't know. The judge says, tisk, 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 don't say victim, Rob. It's from the judge, which is true. I shouldn't be saying that. I should be saying, it sort of depends on what you want to call them. You can call them by their names, Mr. Rosenbaum, Mr. Grosskreutz, Mr. Huber. But, Terry McAuliffe says, Rob, do you think I'll win the Virginia governor election? Not fairly. I don't. Sure don't. Speech Unleashed says, how do they choose which of the 20 will be dismissed later to get to 12? Will the lawyers be able to have a say in it? Can either lawyer object to a juror that is selected for dismissal at the end? So, no, I think at the end it's going to be just sort of a names out of a hat type of process, whatever that looks like, whatever process this court uses to dismiss people randomly, right? There's a process for that. Now, throughout the course of the trial, if there are issues that pop up, for example, if the defense catches wind that jurors are, communicating with other people, or if something, improper is happening, there's conversations taking place between certain, ex parte individuals, then the attorneys, either the prosecution or the defense, at that moment could, notify the judge, and the judge could theoretically excuse them. And it sounds like the judge is willing to do that, right? Even from his description of how jury selection was going to be working, he said, yeah, we're going to start at 20. And if somebody gets sick, they're gone, right? Something else happens. Somebody gets hit by a bus on the way in, they're gone. And so there's sort of this slow whittling down of jurors. And then he said at the very end, if you have, let's say, trial concludes, state rests, defense rests, closing arguments, boom, we're done. At that moment, if you go from 20 down to 16, well, then you only excuse 16 down to 12, right? So you just sort of, whatever the difference is, you just need that 12 magic number. Whatever the remainder is, whoever lasts the trial and doesn't get booted stays around. And then from there, I would imagine that it's just random. You get down to the 12, and then that's the end of it. Good question, Speech. Davis says, why don't they always do jury duty like this? It seems like it's beneficial to the integrity of the trial to be able to strike the extra jurors at the end. What if one of the main jurors is half asleep and disinterested while the alternate is taking notes? Having pre-designated alternates makes zero sense. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying, Davis. And so the alternates are selected at the conclusion of the trial before deliberation, right? So they don't go in there and say, you're sort of a pseudo juror, right? You get to only pay half attention because you're an alternate. They're all official until one gets booted. So they all should be paying attention, but I understand your point. Yeah, there are many ways to do it, right? There are different ways to do it. I think it's interesting. I've never seen it done this way, right? But it is interesting. Monster One says, I am filing a motion to have Rob held in contempt. The judge ordered these people couldn't be called victims. Rob has repeatedly called them victims in defiance of your Honor's order, which is so true. Everybody, I deserve it. Thank you for calling me out on that. It's just sort of habit. And I'm a defense attorney. What a loser. All right, you're right. Totally. Monster One says, everyone hates jury duty, but imagine sitting in a jury for weeks and getting tossed. Yeah, it doesn't sound fun. He says, can you remind us how long Kyle has been locked up without being found guilty of anything? In your opinion, what do you think is the right process for someone accused of murder when it comes to releasing them before trial or keeping them locked up? There are pros and cons on both sides. Be interesting to hear it from your point of view. No name on that one. So Kyle was really only locked up, I think it was for 2 months, maybe a little bit longer, right? I was very upset about that. Because his attorneys are idiots about it. And what they did is they were trying to basically stop extradition. Remember that this all happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin. He fled over to Illinois. They held him there, and he couldn't post bond there given his extradition status. And so they were fighting extradition, where I was just saying, just extradite him, send him back to Wisconsin, because then he could post bail and get out of custody. And guess what happened? After they fought the extradition hearing and lost, wasted 2 months of time, he did go back to Wisconsin, raised the money, posted bail, was out of custody almost right away. So they basically kept him in custody, in my opinion, for 2 months unnecessarily because they're boneheads and they wanted to generate a bunch of money for whatever fund they were raising money for. It was pretty inappropriate, but those are just my opinions on what I saw. I don't make any specific allegations, but it looked problematic. So pros and cons, releasing people. So I think you should go through a case-by-case analysis on every single case, right? And just like you do in any other type of situation, you don't always have blanket rules where you just say for this type of an offense, this happens, right? Those are called mandatory minimums, and they don't really work all that well. A lot of people go to prison for things they shouldn't be going to prison for because some bureaucrat somewhere decided it was good to put it on the books. When you're talking about release conditions, I think it's important to analyze a lot of different factors. A person's prior criminal record, whether they've got a propensity for violence, all sorts of external factors or extenuating circumstances, right? A person's mental health, some of their support systems, connections to the community. There's a lot of different things that we go through that are even in the statutes that come to these determinations. But you take these on a case-by-case basis, and you don't forget the humanity when we're talking about whether somebody should be released. Remember, in this country, we have the presumption of innocence. That has not been taken from us quite yet. We'll see when they make that attempt. I'm Not Gas says, well, it's nice that the judge actually understands the history and the importance of jury selection. It honestly comes off a bit self-aggrandizing with his little speech. That's what he says, while it's nice. Yeah, it is. Yeah, totally. Right. And I noticed that too. I'm Not Gas. I watched it, right? It went on for like 20, 30 minutes, but it's his big debut, so it's his courtroom. You let him do it, right? It happens all the time. Speech Unleashed says, I'm betting this judge is very conservative. I would agree with you. My guess is that if he is going to be a favorable judge for Rittenhouse, to be honest, yes. If Rittenhouse does get convicted of anything, I think the judge will go very light on him. That's from Speech Unleashed. I agree. I think he's a very sympathetic judge to Rittenhouse. From everything I've seen, I would 100% agree. We got a couple others. Captain Jim says, Rob, from your experience, says, do jurors generally weigh the arguments objectively and do what the unbiased, fair, and impartial jurors are supposed to do? Not necessarily in a national trial like this where everyone already has their own agenda, but in 99% of the other cases in our court system, or is fair and impartial and guilty beyond a reasonable doubt largely a myth now? It's a good question. Captain Jim, this is a really big sort of existential question about the justice system. And there's no one clear answer on this, right? You're going to see, I think, a lot of displeasure and cynicism and skepticism and people just outright detesting the justice system. And there's a good reason for that, right? There's a lot of problems with it. It also works, moderately well given the state of mankind and sort of our inner instincts and the disgusting creep towards totalitarianism and all of that. I think it does a moderately decent job of protecting a person's right to counsel and things like that as best we can, right? It's still not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it is useful. And there are other systems in the country where you don't have in the world where you don't have the presumption of innocence, or things like due process. Those are incredibly powerful concepts that fortunately are at least on our books here, even though they're not always perfectly implemented. So, in a case like this, I like to say that we walk in with the presumption of innocence and the government has the burden of proof. I don't believe that to be the case. I think that really sort of, speaking anecdotally, many people have already been preconditioned to believe that if somebody got arrested, they probably did something wrong, right? And the cops are infallible, right? Cops are heroes. They show up with a badge and a gun to do duty, and they're the good guys, right? Good guys versus the bad guys. Guy in orange and handcuffs is the bad guy. Cop in the blue with the shiny badge and the gun, good guy. And you just have that sort of indoctrinated into your mind. And I can't tell you how many times I've just walked in to court with my clients, and people just have open, dripping disdain for the person. And they don't even know what he did. He's just a defendant, right? He's just somebody who just walked into court that day. Presumption of innocence be damned. Due process, all of those things, all gone right out the window. And I got to be honest. I did a jury trial one time. We lost it, and it was something where I thought, just from the look on the jurors' faces when we walked in, just from the look, I thought it was over. You could see the scorn on their face. for our clients, for our client, and just for the whole situation, just dripping with disdain. And so, you take a look at a situation like that and you go, I don't know that there's anything that any lawyer can do in a certain situation like that. You just sort of get a bad draw, and it's a problem. But how else are you going to solve this? It's sort of like the best solution that we've got. And I have a lot of faith that in the cases where it really matters, it can get things right if it's worked properly. So, I'm not a lawyer who just sort of has open general disdain for the entire justice system. The reason I'm doing the work that we do here, the reason why I'm so passionate about these issues about accountability, transparency, and justice is because I believe in the system. I believe that it needs some work and a lot of eyeballs and transparency and oversight, but it is built on the back of some pretty damn good eternal principles, like the right to privacy, right? Like getting a warrant before they just barge into your property, like protecting your right to remain silent, not being compelled to do all of these things are timeless, fundamental concepts that I believe work. We just have to get back, I think, to them to some degree. And our systems are highly politicized, highly incentivized through, money and elections and all of that is problematic. But the base system is built on timeless concepts. And those are the things that I believe in. Juries, sometimes juries, they're going to come to their own conclusion regardless of what you say. And it's like every defense attorney's, never ending internal conflict, internal struggle, conversation, dialogue that we have with ourselves. It's like, what do you make of jury selection? And I think if you ask 100 defense lawyers, you'd probably get 100 different answers from different people. I know a big spectrum of people that say, I don't even care about the jury, doesn't even matter. Pick any jurors you want, don't care, right? Because they're going to make the same arguments because they've sort of seen that no matter what they do, there's going to be a black swan juror. There's going to be somebody who, you ask every single question. What do you watch? What did you have for breakfast? What happened to your grandma? Tell me about your childhood. You can psychoanalyze everybody, but they hear one thing in a trial and they go the opposite direction of what you think, of how you think they'll go. And so it's sort of like, trying to wrap your hands around something that is just so complex that it's very difficult. But I know other attorneys that it's a science, right? They go in there, they want a 53-year-old woman with blue eyes and brown hair. And you go, that's weird. And they go and it works for them, right? So different lawyers are going to have different techniques. Good question. I got to pick up the pace. Nadarb says 2 things. That's interesting to know that back when he started, these types of trials had to be by law sequestered. What changed that? One would think that now more than ever, we would want people to find out of the information, out of the information loop for a few days. So I don't know what changed that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the rules are in Wisconsin. For people like Richie McGinnis, do they have any say in the prosecutor adding charges on their behalf? From what I recall, Richie's testimony for the state, it says Kyle was being chased and they were trying to hurt him. At least the one guy reached for his gun. So it's kind of weird. They would even use his as a witness for starters, but also file charges on his behalf. It's a good question on point 2 there, Nadarb. And I remember that, right? McGinnis's testimony, we read the probable cause statement that was originally proffered forward here back in the early days of this when charges were first filed in the Rittenhouse case. And back then, it read to me like McGinnis was a witness for the defense. He was like every paragraph was like McGinnis said he was running away. McGinnis said he tried to disengage. McGinnis said that Rosenbaum was the aggressor. You're going, what the heck? Why is Kyle Rittenhouse being charged? This is insane. And so I agree that McGinnis's testimony did seem favorable to Rittenhouse. That being said, right, you as a victim, oftentimes people think that somebody can, it's like in the movies. Cop shows up. I don't want to press charges. Okay, well, I guess that's it for me then. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee. Thanks for the phone call. Right? It's not how it works. Right? In a domestic violence case, oftentimes the victim, right, does not want to be prosecuting their spouse. And the government says, well, we don't care about that because he committed a crime and you're the victim here. And so they're going to prosecute it with or without you. Same type of thing can happen here, right? McGinnis is somebody who may not be necessarily a cooperative witness, but they're still prosecuting. Like he may say, oh, I wasn't hit, I wasn't shot, I wasn't harmed. I really don't want anything to do with it. They still say, you are the victim of reckless endangerment. We're going to subpoena you to come to court and testify. And they may not need him to say anything. I don't know if they're going to call him or not, but They may not need him to say anything other than what he already said. And they may think that that gives them strong enough basis to convict Kyle regardless, even if his testimony did seem like it was favorable to Rittenhouse. Who knows if things have changed? Good question, Adarb. A couple more on this one. Shades says, the little I heard from the judge, I really appreciate not only the historical references, but some of the unusual details he noted. People take for granted the raw, bloody seriousness of history in all cultures nowadays, let alone the founding of America. Respect. Yeah, so you got some kind of, alternate takes here. It is good to hear from a judge just to sort of get your bearings straight. What does the judge say about all this? And now we know. We have Bowdlerize Me says, hey, Rob, hope your weekend was good. Let's see here. That was on the Baldwin statement. So we'll save that one. Let me reopen this and get the other questions queued up. All right, so we'll save that one for the next segment. Next up, we got Lil Mandy is here, says, did the judge allow the evidence from the Elijah Schaffer and the other reporters on the grounds, video and testimony in the evidence hearing? Elijah Schaffer? I don't know the answer to that question, Lil Mandy. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not real sure what part of... I'm not sure what you're talking about. I apologize on that. The Elijah Schaffer, we covered a lot of the different footage and we covered a lot of the pre-trial conversations that were happening. Most of what we were talking about was I don't know. If you told me what specific video, then maybe I could tell you about it, but I don't know what Elijah Schaffer is referring to. But we did talk a lot about the Daubert hearing and some of the expert witness testimony, and they were referencing back to some of the video that was played. So like one example of the video that we played was when Rittenhouse was walking and got water bottles, and police said to him, we appreciate you. We really do. Right. And so that, I don't know if that is Elijah Schaffer's video, but yes, I think that video is coming in. So there are a bunch of those little social media videos that are labeled a bunch of different ways. And most stuff is coming in as far as I can tell. If I had to generalize it, this judge said that even during the pretrial proceedings. He came out and he said specifically that there was his prior precedent essentially was he wants to see most stuff come in and then he's going to decide what to exclude out. So we'll see what he says. Leafy Bug is here, says, what do you think about judges going on at length about the Founders, Bill of Rights, delivering what seems to be a long history lecture at this stage in the process? Do you think he would do this for every jury trial he presides over, or it's because of the publicity of this trial? All seems a bit long-winded to me. Yeah, I think you're right, Leafy Bug. I think you're right. I highly doubt that he does it for all of his jury trials. It was a long speech. Maybe he does. I don't know. He was also playing Jeopardy before it all started. Did you see that? So while the attorneys were still goofing off, he was actually, like, I'm not joking, was playing Jeopardy with jurors. Something about, who climbed the Himalayas in 1940? Madonna? Yes, it was Madonna. Congratulations. Wow. Okay. So it was interesting way to approach it. Not really my cup of tea, right? I kind of like judges. I actually like Judge Cahill a lot, right? Really by the book, defense motions 1 through 4 in order. What's your argument? What's your defense? Okay, I'm going to review them over the weekend, come back decisions. On number 1, yes. 2, yes. 3, no. 4, yes. Perfect, right? This judge has not been operating that way at all. Very organic. Things just kind of, maneuver around the edges, and they come up and they birth something, and then we have to all figure out what's happening. That was from Leafy Bug. Good to see you. Another one here from Perry Masonary says, oh my God, Rob, bloodshed at Turkey Day? Sorry, but you have to eat out on the deck. Bring a coat. It will be cold. That's for Rittenhouse. That's from Perry Masonary. Good to see you, Perry. We have a Monster One says, I don't like this prosecutor. He's got a very punchable voice. Thomas Binger? Yeah. Not a huge fan. Jake from Oxford says, Rob, normally to display my power over you with the State Department, I would change the dim on your light bulb. We are trying out new technologies today. I will remove the sign behind you. That's from Jake Sullivan over at Oxford. And, it looks naked back there. Is this that's hypersonic missile? Maybe is China testing something out? Or is this that secret wave that they have down there in Cuba? It's making all of our diplomats sick. Well, either way, it's good news. That means I'm moving up in the world. Jake from Oxford says it falls. Remember, certificates, diplomas, all over the walls. They're all coming down. Three Girly says your sign was slowly coming off the wall the whole segment. It just finally crashed down. Oh, it did it. I didn't know that. This segment is now about my sign. Thunder 7 says, give me a judge who meanders a bit, but who respects the Constitution, and an on-point judge who's an activist that favors banning the Second Amendment. This judge seems like an old-fashioned type who loves law and order, regardless of a defendant's political leanings. What say you, Rob? Happy with the judge? Well, I'm not quite there yet, Thunder 7, on formal opinions on the judge. We'll take his rulings as they come and call balls and strikes as best we can throughout the remainder of the trial. But, his style is a little bit different, right? It's a different style, no question about it. Doesn't mean it's bad, just something that's a little bit different. And we're going to get to see a colorful trial as a result. Speech Unleashed says, have you ever witnessed jurors who simply don't want to serve on a jury and just say they would find the person guilty or innocent so they can be removed from jury duty? Yeah, I mean, people do that all the time. So one of the most common questions that the judges will ask is, and it's not to exclude jurors, but it's sort of instructive, is they'll say, ladies and gentlemen, okay, so welcome to my courtroom. Is there anybody here in the panel of the 50 who think that Mr. Grueller here is, in fact, already guilty before you've heard even one word from any of the attorneys seated here, anybody? And you're going to get 3 or 4 people out of 50 who go, yeah, I think he's guilty. And then he goes, okay, well, even though, Mr. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we have the presumption of innocence. He's not actually, in fact, guilty. And do you understand that? And they go, yeah, that makes sense. And then you say to the next group of people, okay, how many people don't know whether he's innocent or guilty yet? How many people just don't know, right? No evidence has come forward yet. Nobody's presented anything yet. No opening argument, nothing. We know he's not guilty, but okay, that's fine. How many people just don't know? And I'm not joking. You're going to get, 2/3 of the room is going to go, yeah, you're right. I don't know. I have no idea. I really don't know. And the judge says, thank you for your honesty, but that's also the wrong answer. The right answer is, in fact, he is innocent, right? This person is in fact, not guilty. And so those questions will come up, and people regularly will still just double down on that and just, no, I mean, he's arrested. He's sitting here, he's sitting here a cop. He wouldn't be here if he didn't do something wrong. So the judge will try to separate those people out. But even the people who are in the first group, sometimes you'll get people that just go, well, I mean, he's here. He's seated there. Wouldn't be there if one didn't do something wrong. Yeah. Nadarb says, something bothers me about the state and Fed lawyering for one citizen over another citizen and trying to tip the scale their way by potentially using a juror with obvious bias. Have we always had prosecutors, or were things different early on? Because it just feels wrong to me. The people have that right. The state or the Fed does not. Yeah, I mean, I think we've had in the United States prosecutors ever since sort of, we set foot here, right? Ever since sort of the old, English common law made its way ashore. I think there's always been prosecutors, right? Even the British responsible for the Boston Massacre were prosecuted, and John Adams defended them, right? I'm Not Gas says, so I know you're not allowed to discriminate in jury selection, but what is the threshold, especially when certain demographics are demonstrably predisposed to certain opinions in different types of cases? Based on polling, you can see in self-defense cases, women are not as favorable as jurors unless the defendant is female. Black jurors show more racial in-group preference. White jurors more likely to find defendants guilty, etc. And sort of asking, what's the standard here? And so let me see if I can pull this up for you. I'm Not Gas. Here's how this works. It's called the Batson Challenge. So if you take a look over here at Cornell, the objection, so let's say, for example, that you have one attorney who's just, striking all the black people off of a jury, or somebody striking all the white people. It's called the Batson Challenge, right? It's an objection to the validity of a peremptory challenge. It's on the ground that the other party is trying to exclude a potential juror on the basis of race, ethnicity, or sex. This was actually brought up in the Chauvin case. I think the prosecution brought this out, actually. And so you've got a whole standard here on how you analyze whether one side is using those in a discriminatory fashion. And so that's where I would point you for further analysis over there. All right, a couple other questions. Where was I over here? Former LEO says, unfortunately, a long time ago, I figured out that the only people seated on a juries were too stupid to get out of jury duty. I apologize in advance for possibly insulting any of my fellow forum members. That's from a former LEO, former police officer in the House. George Washington says, I'm surprised Judge Bruce Schroeder is still on the bench. He was here when we signed the Declaration of Independence. Glad to see he's still in the game, still kicking, still doing jury trials. Jeremy Matrita says, Rob, so many people say they don't like weapons. However, I believe they are missing the point of this trial. The root question of this trial is, do people have the right to defend themselves when their life is in danger? Would Kyle be on trial if he had used any other method to defend himself, assuming the same outcome? I think the true test to measure if he didn't have the right to defend himself is to put the, quote, reasonable person to the test and see if they let themselves get killed or if they defend their own lives. It's a very good point there, Jeremy. Right? The reasonable person standard. If you were there, if that was your son, does that look like self-defense to you? Well, my son would never go there in the first place. But if he were right there, then, and we're not asking about that, right? We're asking about that moment. Would a person right then and there, same circumstances, same conditions, would they feel like their life was in danger and be justified in using lethal force to defend themselves? People will still tell you no. Lil Mandy says, didn't Kyle replace his original lawyer, L. Lynn Wood? Yeah, look, Kyle has, I think it was L. Lynn Wood. It was also John Pierce. John Pierce, I think, was the original. Don't know if Lynn Wood got involved, actually, now that you mention it. He was sort of in the circle. But it was originally John Pierce, right? John Pierce and a lot of other just people who I don't know what they were doing, to be honest. And I was a lot more reserved in my criticism of them when it first started, but I'm loosening up here on YouTube. Monster One says, was Juror 30 the same one as before? I think she was the Thanksgiving one as well. If so, she's clearly just trying to get out of it. She's like, I have a nephew, I have PTSD, I've got Thanksgiving coming up. Also, you know, I don't like AR-15s either. Just get me off of this thing, please. Somebody. Joe Biden says, I pooped my pants. I need to borrow Nadler's diapers. Monster One says, if you ever got Lincoln lawyered, what would you do? Well, I mean, whatever Matthew McConaughey did. He got out of that okay, didn't he? How'd that movie end? Did he survive? I think so. Lil Mandy says, Eliza Schaefer has a show called Slightly Offensive. He's the one who recorded the original footage. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, so as far as I know then, I think all of that is coming in, as far as I know. But I don't know for sure. So don't hold me to that. This has been sort of a mess of this, right? Like a lot of people really don't know what is coming in until it sort of is time for it to come in. Then the judge is going to decide. The judge is like, well, we're going to rule on that when the time comes. And you go, well, it's like now. Like, I need to know, am I preparing my case or can I use this stuff? He's like, well, we'll just decide when we get there. All right. John Halgren says, quality signs are hard to come by. You get what you pay for. It's a great design, though. All right. No, it's no problem. I mean, I'm just going to duct tape the heck out of that puppy. It's not coming down ever again. Now, the R's and the law group, they might come off. You know, I can't vouch for those. But as soon as I get off this show, I'm getting a drill, a hammer, a tub of Gorilla Glue, two rolls of duct tape, and a lot more. Three Girly says, have you ever had anyone bring up jury nullification as the reason why they should not be seated on the jury? No. I did I might have told this story before. I did a trial one time it was a jury trial on a reckless driving charge early in my career. And I was up in a little town, and there was no real talk of jury nullification. But in little towns, a lot of people have sort of general disdain for law enforcement, which is a good thing if you're a defense lawyer. But it's also something where people are very vocal about their words, about their opinions, right? They just sort of say what is out there. And there was one case where we were just about to get this jury seated, and there was a time for us to sort of exercise our strikes. And there was one woman who was sort of neutral, like, you know, she was kind of like, I think she'd be fine. I wasn't really real keen on her, and I wasn't really real adamant to get rid of her. And the prosecution was probably the same too, right? Just kind of like this, just kind of, hard to read woman. I had other people that I think needed a peremptory more than her, so she was going to stay. Same with the prosecutor. And so we're going through questioning, and the judge is like, it's like literally like 5 minutes before we're all going to issue our final, we're going to have the final jury, we're going to be good to go. Judge says, and I'm like ready to go. Judge says something, and is there anything else that you think that we should know before we wrap up our questions? And this lady, quiet lady, just raises her hand. I think I should tell you something. Yes, ma'am. What do you have to say to us all? And this lady sort of stands up or, raises her hand, whatever. Well, I just really hate police officers. And I just don't think that I could be impartial if this case involves police officers. And I'm just going, she's like, I don't trust police officers. I just don't trust them. And I just don't believe that they tell the truth. And I'm just like, not that I disagree with her or I agree with her, right? I'm not taking any perspective on that, but that's a great juror for a defense lawyer to have, right? Somebody who doesn't trust the police. So if she would have just zipped it for 5 more minutes, we would have striked the other jurors off the panel, and she would have got on there, and she would have been one single juror that's just like, well, I just don't trust police anywhere, right? And so nobody would have seen that. I could have never seen that. Prosecution would have never seen that. Any questions we would have asked, nothing flagged her, nothing tipped her off. She just volunteered it. So you can see you could have all this very detailed jury science, and something like that will slip through. That wasn't jury nullification, but that was probably about as close as it's come, right? It's like, I don't care what the cops say. I don't trust anything that comes out of their mouths. So, that's the type of stuff that you'll see, but nobody ever said anything like, if I get on there, I'm going to nullify the jury or move for that. Anyways, AOC says, well, white guy Rob defending the KKK again. These are some of the white supremacy propaganda that he spews on his racist show, live streamed from someone else's pickle-filled hot tub in a bunker, wearing nothing but fluorescent bikini, eating beluga caviar, and sipping expensive champagne from an undisclosed location while getting stuck between 120,000 subscribers and a racist background lamp that couldn't find brightness level, even if it was sitting next to the sun. Man, that is savage, AOC. First of all, I never even met you, okay? And for you to come on my channel and degrade me like that in front of my own audience is very emasculating, and I don't appreciate it. And first of all, that lamp is white because I can't put a black color in there, okay? That's not my fault. That's physics. So just take it up with the good maker himself, all right? And leave me the hell alone. All right, thank you, AOC. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your comment. Sasha Sisha says, hey, Rob, hope you're doing well. One of the rare times that I have a late night shift, I'm able to watch your show live. It's a shame on what they're doing to New York City. Did you watch the horrific video of this African-American man punching a lady in the face and no one did anything? What a horrible thing. Time to carry a can of wasp spray everywhere. That's from Sasha Shisha. I did see that video, Sasha, and I saw that woman's also emasculated man husband or whatever that guy was doing just sit there and take it too. The whole subway just sat there and just let that happen. It was wild. But again, you just don't know what you do in those situations. Very weird video. If you didn't see it, this woman is on a subway, packed subway. You have another man who comes on there, obviously in a bad, having a bad day. She tells him to chill out, and he just clocks her right in the face. Totally unwarranted, totally uncalled for. Assault, criminal assault. And he just got his kids and walked away. And nobody did anything about it. So that's the kind of, I guess, testosterone we have roaming around the subways over there, which makes sense. I mean, the rest of the city has been basically taken over. Joe Biden's here says, my butt's been wiped. All right, so that's good. We have Social Viking says, 100% self-defense. If these shots hit some MAGA hat attackers, there wouldn't even be a trial. It's a good point, Social Viking. It's true. You're 100% right. And if this happened, I think, after an election year, right? If this happened like this year, would it even be a national story? I mean, I think it would, but not to the same degree, right? They wanted blood. This was an us versus them moment, right? This was the summer of unrest. Chauvin and, Floyd and the whole thing was just a summer of unrest. Very peaceful, though. Monster One says, pretty sure Lynn Wood bailed Kyle out. Maybe that's right. Yeah, it's hard. It was kind of a mess, right? You had a lot of these vultures just parachuting in to get on the back of this case. Everybody wanted their 15 minutes. It was disgusting. Monster One says, Rob, didn't you have a baby with AOC? Now you don't know her. Typical deadbeat father. It's true. Yeah, it's true. I don't think we did. I don't think we did, though. If we did, going to have a lot of explaining to do to a lot of people. Former LEO, but it'd be a good story, though. Former LEO says, easy off oven cleaner works well. What for? What is that for, former LEO? For my sign or for removing fingerprints? AOC says your lamp is so racist that your sign tried to change its postcode. Okay. All right, my friends. Those were great questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We record live every day, 4 p.m. Arizona time, 7 p.m. Eastern at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Come join us when we have these recordings so you can be a part of the show. Thank you for all of your support. All right, and so we're going to jump into the next segment. Let's see what else we've got. Did we spend an hour and 20 minutes on Rittenhouse? Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. That's a lot of time. We got 2 more segments on this show. My goodness. This is ridiculous. I love it's a good case. I'm super excited about it. All right. So we're going to move on into the next story, the next segment. Let's get this queued up. Alec Baldwin finally broke silence, came out and gave a public statement on the side of the road with his wife. Apparently his kids were in the car crying nearby. Apparently, the story goes, some press were following him and he needed to just have a conversation, get something off of his chest. It was a 3.5-minute statement. We are going to play the full thing here, but we're not going to play the full thing in one fell swoop. I have it broken up into 4 segments. I also have a transcript of what he said. And I've got some questions about whether this was really the spontaneous little friendly chit-chat that he says it is. Sounded much more like a scripted, narrated press release that is already framing out some of his defense. And so we're going to get into that. I want to go back and start by taking a look at the board so that we understand all the different components that are a part of the Baldwin Rust shooting case. Then we're going to take a look at how Baldwin framed this, talked about it as a 1 in a trillion incident, right? Kind of talking about this as an accident. And then also is communicating as though he doesn't know anything about how any of this works. I'm just an actor. Everybody else is the expert. All I do is just show up, say the lines, look good, point the gun, pull the trigger. But aside from that, I've got no responsibility. And so we're going to fit this into our framework and our chain of causation that we've been following along thus far. Before we get there, let's take a look at the board. This is the summation of the various parties that we're talking about in the Rust shooting. We can see Alec Baldwin is here at the middle, and we've got the prosecution and the sheriff on the left. We've got Halna Hutchins here. She is deceased, no longer with us, and Alec Baldwin here. Now today, previously on this channel, we've talked about Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, talked about her defense in a prior video. Remember, she got lawyers, Jason Bowles and Robert Gorenchi. They released a statement previously, have not heard from Dave Halls, and just now today heard from Alec Baldwin. And so we understand what the chain of causation looks like, remember that it's a sequence of events. And remember, the standard narrative that we've heard about in this shooting was that Halna Hutchins here on the left was the armorist who loaded the gun, was responsible for maintaining inventory, making sure all the weaponry was in order. She gave the gun to David Halls. David Halls is the assistant director who presumably checked the gun, shouted "cold gun," and then gave the gun to Alec Baldwin, who of course then pulled the trigger, shooting Halna Hutchins. Now, couple different things here. We already heard from Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. She is trying to sever liability, saying I'm not involved in the chain of causation, saying that all she essentially does is manage the weaponry. She gave it to Halls, who was supposed to check it, who gave it to Baldwin, who was supposed to check it. Neither of them did. She's also blaming the production, right? She's saying that Alec Baldwin and the production team, they ran such a shoddy ship. They left things in such disarray that there was no way that Hannah Gutierrez-Reed could possibly be somebody who could run a tight ship, who could keep her eye on things. Why? Because Alec Baldwin, who is a producer, and assistant director David Halls, they both led to this sort of problematic production, and that cuts off liability here. Is what her legal arguments were. And we spent a lot more time on that in a prior video. That's just the quick and dirty nuts and bolts of this. But now we're talking about it in a different context. We're talking about Alec Baldwin. He came out now. We have some testimony from him. We have a statement from him, a public statement he made for some reason, even though he admits multiple times that he shouldn't be making public statements. Probably his attorneys told him this as well, but he did so for about 3.5 minutes. And so we are going to take a look at it. Now, I'm not going to play the full 3.5 minutes here. I'm going to play about 40 seconds of the video, and then we're going to jump into the transcript, and we're just going to do an analysis and actually break down the testimony or the statement that he gave, because there's a lot in there. And when you watch this, you're going to see he's kind of shaken up, right? He's very sort of looks like he's almost erratic to some degree, very tense, very tight, almost aggressive, and a little bit concerned, shaken up. And so we're gonna watch it and then read it, because you're gonna see his emotion, and then we're gonna read what he says. Sometimes it's hard to listen to what a person says when they are dripping with emotion. That's why a transcript is important. So here is the first segment of Alec Baldwin talking to the media on the side of the road along with his wife. Here he is.
Let's go.
I will.
What do you want to know?
All right, Alec, what's the current state of what's going on with the case?
I'm not allowed to make any comments because it's an ongoing investigation. I've been ordered by the Sheriff's Department in Santa Fe. I can't answer any questions about the investigation. I can't. It's an active investigation in terms of a woman dying. She was my friend. She was my friend. The day I arrived in Santa Fe to start shooting, I took her to dinner with Joel, the director. We were a very, very well-oiled crew shooting a film together, and then this horrible event happened. Now, I've been told multiple times, don't make any comments about the ongoing investigation, and I can't. That's it.
Okay, so he's been told that multiple times, but he goes on and he talks for another 2.5 minutes after that. Now, the woman who came up and approached him was his wife, Hilaria Baldwin, and she sort of gets shooed away like the help, right? She walks up to him. He's like, excuse me, get out of here. And so she just kind of walks away, right? Which was weird to me, right? I think as I'm not a husband, but as a husband, you maybe, honey, 1 second, like, sweetheart, like, I've got this, like, take a quick step back. Let me handle this. He's like, excuse me, get out of here. Excuse me, get out of here. So that was strange in and of itself, but that's a side note. Now let's take a look at the actual transcript and see if we can tease out what's happening here. Because you just watched that, right? A lot of emotion, a lot of energy coming out of him. Let's see what he actually said. Here, it says, let's go. Speaker, I will. Okay, Alec Baldwin says, what do you want to know? Speaker says, all right, Alec, what's the current statement with what's going on with the case? Not allowed to make any comments. Ongoing investigation. I've been ordered by the Sheriff's Department in Santa Fe. Can't answer any questions about the investigation. I can't. Active investigation in terms of a woman died. She was my friend. The day I arrived in Santa Fe and started shooting, I took her to dinner. Excuse me, that's when his wife comes in. We're a very well-oiled crew shooting a film together, and then this horrible event happened. Now I've been told multiple times, don't make any comments about the ongoing investigation, and I can't, that's it. Okay, now obviously he's just getting started, because the segment has a lot more to go. So he is acknowledging that, and he's making a statement anyways. Okay, so look, I know I'm a cynical person. At times, this is one of those times. And this is one of those times where I think, maybe he had a little more thought into this than maybe what they're letting on, because he says he can't make a statement, and then we get a full statement, which leads me to believe that they actually thought about this a little bit. So here we have another clip. He picks it up here, and now he's sort of going into the rest of his statement. Here's Alec Baldwin.
And you met
what are the questions that you have other than that?
You met with I'm afraid I forget her name in a moment, but you met with her family in the day.
Yes,
her
I
name
met
is
with her
Helena. If you're spending this much time waiting for us, you should
don't
know
know
her
her
name.
name?
Her name is Helena.
Helena Hutchins. I met with her husband Matthew and her son. Yes, that's right.
And how did that meeting go?
I wouldn't know how to characterize it. They're mortified.
You guys, you know what? No details.
Do me a favor. I'm gonna answer the question.
Well, I appreciate that he was probably very upset.
Okay. Pretty interesting, right? So let's think if you are a defense lawyer and you want your clients to be very, very sympathetic. What do? Well, you send them out there and you tell them you have to immediately identify with the victim, the person who is no longer with us. You have to go out and show tremendous empathy and tremendous sympathy to them. And so, boom, you saw that right on point. They said, have you met with her woman? Boom. Her name's Helena Hutchins, right? And they both sort of latched. He goes, you don't even know her name. Like, you don't even know her name. And then switches it right into a conversation about, I met with the son, I met with the husband, Matthew, and his son, and I've been very involved with the family. And so 10 out of 10 as far as I can tell, right? That's Oscar performance right there. Really well done. And I'm being a little bit facetious here. I don't want to be disingenuous and say maybe he doesn't mean it. I am also saying that this is perfect. If you are a defense attorney and you have to make a statement and you have to go out there and give a public face to something that's happening here, pretty good. Go out there, you make the media look like jerks and losers for asking you questions about the woman you shot by saying, you don't even know her name. I know her name. I shot her and killed her, but I know her name. You don't. You're just vultures out there who are trying to, latch onto a case. But this is a tragedy. I know her name. I met with her son. I met with Matthew. So very effective in terms of mitigation. It's sort of trying to humanize the situation. You can see the pain. You can see his wife is all amped up about it. All out there defending him. He doesn't know how to handle the situation. He's pushing her back. So they sort of look like a family in distress. Like he's really distraught over this whole thing, and he's communicating that well, right? I don't call it acting if you want to. Call it genuine behavior. That's going to be up for the jury to decide at some point. Let's take a listen in at this transcript. It says, you met with, what other questions do you have? You met with, forget her name at the moment, but you met with her family. Helena, her name is Helena. You spend this much time waiting for us, you should know her name. Okay, and so this leads me to believe that these people were actually waiting for them at some turnoff or at some inn or wherever they're driving from. Okay, and so this is a nice little prompt. As soon as this speaker forget her name at the moment. Okay. So somebody who is camping out all day for the Baldwins or whatever, you spend so much time waiting for us and you can't even remember her name. All right. Says you don't know her name. So that gives Alec a good time to sort of, jump in there. How'd the meeting go? I wouldn't know how to characterize it. They're mortified. Do me a favor. I'm going to answer the question. Telling his wife again, I'm doing the favor. And the questioner saying, yeah, he was probably upset. Okay. So then we're going to get into some real meat and potatoes here. Now, Alec goes off for about 2 full paragraphs here. This next clip's about 1.5 minutes. I'm just going to let it go. Then we're going to unpack it in the transcript where we can break out some of the legal arguments that he's making and keep this in mind in the context of the chain of causation. Okay, the circles from Hannah Gutierrez Reed over to David Halls over to Alec Baldwin to Helena Hutchins. That chain of causation here. We're going to watch how Alec Baldwin is trying to break that in this next segment. He's going to try to shatter that, reconfigure that connection to remove himself from that chain. And this is where he does it. Let's listen in.
The guy is overwhelmed with grief. This is something that there are incidental accidents on film sets from time to time, but nothing like this. This is a 1 in a trillion episode. It's a 1 in a trillion film. And so he is in shock. He has a 9-year-old son. We are, in constant contact with him because we're very worried about his family and his kid. And as I said, we're eagerly awaiting for the sheriff's department to tell us what their investigation has yielded. What else do you have?
Would you ever work on another film set that involves firearms of that nature?
I couldn't answer that question. I really don't have any. I have no sense of it at all. I do know that an ongoing effort to limit the use of firearms on film sets is something I'm extremely interested in. Where are you? But remember, something that I think is important, and that is, how many bullets have been fired in films and TV shows in the last 75 years? This is America. Millions. How many bullets have gone off in movies and on TV sets before? Billions in the last 75 years. And nearly all of them without incident. So what has to happen now is we have to realize that when it does go wrong, and it's this horrible, catastrophic thing, some new measures have to take place. Rubber guns, plastic guns, no real armaments on set. That's not for me to decide. It's urgent. It's urgent that you understand I'm not an expert in this field. So whatever other people decide is the best way to go in terms of protecting people's safety on film sets, I'm all in favor of, and I will cooperate with that in any way that I can.
He's doing a lot of talking for somebody who's not supposed to be making any statements. And I know that audio is quite loud. There's a lot of traffic roadway, noise there. But he's talking a whole lot about this, right? Talking about sort of mitigation, making sure this doesn't happen again. If you're a defense lawyer, you are screaming at him talking, right? Because you're waiting for him to admit something. Yeah, maybe we could have done something better with guns in the next movie. Maybe we could have, put the live rounds in a different toolbox than the dummy rounds, or something like that. He's getting really close to those statements without saying anything like that. He's, well, listen, I can't comment on any future projects, but certainly something needs to be done anytime there's a tragedy. Don't talk to me about it, though, right? There's other experts who are much more qualified. I just do whatever they say, which brings us to how this is sort of breaking that chain of causation. Let's go right back to the transcript here. And there's a couple interesting points. Number one, where he says, this is a 1 in a trillion episode. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're just, 1 in a trillion. It's a 1 in a trillion event. He's in shock, 9-year-old son. We're eagerly awaiting for the sheriff department to tell us what their investigation has yielded. Okay, 1 in a trillion. We're going to see that. He's going to use another term like that. He says 1 in a billion somewhere later on. Let's see. You're going to work on another set that involves firearms. Can't answer that question. No sense of it at all. I don't know. I do know that an ongoing effort to limit the use of firearms is something I'm extremely interested in. Remember, this is something I think is important. How many bullets have been fired? Probably billions in the last 75 years, right? 1 in a trillion, 1 in a billion conversation in the last 75 years. It does go wrong. This horrible, catastrophic thing. Some new measures have to take place. But it's not for me to decide. It's urgent, but I'm not an expert in this field. So whatever other people decide is best in terms of protecting people's safety, I'm in favor of it. Okay, it's a nice statement. It's a really nice statement. If you are concocting together a sort of a public relations statement there, it's a pretty good one. I'm going to rely on what all the experts tell me to do. This is a 1 in a trillion situation. I had essentially no wrongdoing, right? Because it's 1 in a trillion. How can you criminalize somebody for something that has those odds? It's very hard to do. And if he's not responsible for safety, or his opinion is not relevant in the development of safety on movie sets, well, it's kind of hard to hold him to a certain standard on this movie set, because he's not an expert in the field. He knows it's urgent, but he's not an expert in the field. Other people are. And so we go from this chain of causation, where you could arguably say, well, Heather gave it to David, David gave it to Alec, Alec shot Halna, and so maybe all three of them were responsible. In other words, if it were not for any one of them, she'd still be alive. They all, in some way, shape, or manner, contributed to her death, and that's why we're seeing all of them try to expel themselves from this chain of custody. Alec Baldwin is going to be doing it also right here. He's sort of right here in the middle. And so what we saw from his statement was chance, right? This was an accident. This was a true accident. There was nothing that we could have done to foresee this coming. He uses gigantic numbers. He talks about billions, right? Billions of bullets have gone off. Trillions of a 1 in a trillion situation that something like this would happen. And so what this means sort of legally is that this is not foreseeable, right? You can't be negligent when something was not foreseeable. You're negligent when you know you should have done something the right way and you didn't do it because you knew and you didn't do it the right way. You're negligent. That's reckless. You knew better. You were acting reckless anyways. And we went through some of that analysis on the Hannah Reid video where we talked about that, right? Wantonness, recklessness, regular negligence is the only thing that's necessary when you're talking about a firearm. But you can't you can't have regular negligence when you don't know that you have a duty, because something is so unforeseeable that it's a random accident. 1 in a trillion. You can't possibly prepare for that. So you can't have criminal liability because it's 1 in a trillion. It's 1 in a billion. Nobody could have ever thought about it. So Alec Baldwin is trying to just sever this chain right here. None of us are responsible for this. Okay, it's a 1 in a million thing. And especially not him, because he was only just one fraction of this tiny accident. And the other way that Baldwin is trying to sort of maneuver this thing, or, unintentionally, but this is just sort of what's happening, I think, even logically in his subconscious, is to just sort of remove himself from the entire equation. You can see this is grayed out here. Alec Baldwin is just not really even involved in anything, right? He's just sort of a mechanical person who's just saying something and pulling the trigger. You could have a robot there, right? Just kind of do things and that's it. There's no mechanism in this chain by which he's supposed to double check something or do anything that would have prevented Halna from being killed. right? He needs a director who directs him what to do every which way you turn. So he's not an expert, as he mentioned in his statement. I don't know anything about this stuff. Whatever they say to do, I'm in. I don't care. I know it's urgent, and I'm willing to do anything, but it's outside of my scope. I am just not educated enough to have a solid opinion on what needs to be done. Therefore, I'm going to remove myself from the chain of custody, from the chain of causation here, and everybody else is responsible. He's just an innocent bystander, just taking orders. Everybody else is an expert. And then in our last segment, we're going to see they close this out. We'll do this one in reverse. Here is the actual transcript. It says, do you have any further projects in the work? Nothing I can talk about. Why Vermont, Alec? Why? Hilaria says, because it's private. No, that's personal. Yeah, that's private. Anything else? So just do me a favor. Don't you mind? My kids are in the car crying because you guys are following them and they know. But all I want to do is a courtesy to you. I came to talk to you. I'm not allowed to comment on the investigation. All I want to do is a courtesy to you. I came to talk to you. I'm not allowed to comment on the investigation. I talk to the cops every day. I talk to them every day. So it kind of sounds like he walked over to them, but the kids were in the car crying nearby. Here is this, and the actual transcript stops. We actually have more video than we do transcripts, so here that is.
Do you have any further projects in the works at the moment, or is everything on hold?
No, that's irrelevant to what we're talking about.
Do you think production will start up again on
No, I doubt it necessarily. Was there anything else?
Why Vermont, Alex?
Because
that's
we
a
just do,
no,
it's
that's
private.
a person. That's private. Yeah, that's private. Anything else?
Okay.
So just do me a favor, you don't mind? My kids are in the car crying.
Because you guys are following
And
them
all I
and
want
they
to do,
know.
as a courtesy to you, I came to talk to you. I'm not allowed to comment on the investigation. I talk to the cops every day. I talk to them every day to find out.
They know where you are.
Look, yeah, I'm cooperating with them, of course. So my point is that I'm just asking. We sat down as a courtesy now to talk to you. Now, please, would you just not follow us for the rest? Just leave us
Just
alone.
go home.
We gave
Go
you everything
home.
we could
Thank
possibly
you.
give you. Okay?
Thank you.
Go home.
Condolences. Thank you.
Now turn it off.
Okay, so that was the Alec Baldwin statement. Pretty well done for a very impromptu statement on the side of the road. Yeah. All right, well, let's see what you have to say about it over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We've got some questions coming in hot. Let's see here. I had one saved, queued up earlier. This one was from Bowdler Eyes. He says, Rob, hope your weekend was good. Right back out you, Bowdler Eyes. Says, I saw Alec's roadside press conference. He had a blank look on his face when he unloaded on the reporters. Thought it was funny when he got triggered when his wife tried to stop him from executing a full press conference. Does he have prop lawyers and not real ones? Because you'd think as a safety precaution they'd hire a silencer to keep Alec from going off. Seriously, though, I like it, but he needs to shut up. Yeah. I mean, unless that was the statement they wanted to go out. Just saying. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, shut up. Unless it's very, very, very well articulated statement. Lil Mandy says, nope, that was from the last segment, so I forgot. We had that one there. Okay, so my questions are a little bit out of order here. All right, here we've got Baldwin. Perry Masonary says, Rob, isn't Alec Baldwin the spokesperson for gun safety? If so, look over there. Nothing going on here. Yeah, he was very aggressive against firearm ownership. Sasha Sisha says, tinfoil hat moment. I heard Helena Hutchins has some connection with the Clintons. Not sure how true that is, but if it were true, that is some crazy, shiny tinfoil hat stuff. I love me some tinfoil hat stuff. No question about that. I don't believe any of these people, so I like to dig in and see some evidence before I take their word for it. I'm Not Gas says, if I was Baldwin's lawyer, I would literally lock him in a basement until the trial date. A narcissist with a platform would be the worst client to have. Yeah, but I don't think he's stupid. I think he's probably following instructions pretty well. I'm just saying. Be Brave says, look at you go with all those transcripts and charts. Love it. Well, Be Brave. We're trying to deliver here. I'm trying to deliver a decent show. Trying my best. Jeremy Matrita says, speaking of the bystander effect, I believe it has been amplified and transformed into the bystander videographer effect. People will typically fall into two categories. The, quote, I don't want to be on the 5 o'clock news person, and this might be my first viral video person. As for Baldwin, he was reliving his Trump impression when he said, excuse me, as he was trying to say he isn't allowed to comment on the investigation, followed by commenting on the investigation. Yeah, it didn't seem very in sync to me. And I think you picked up on that too, Jeremy. Plead the Fifth says, isn't it better for the lawyer to do the PR, not the person? What an idiot. Alex should have used the Pot Brothers at law. Script of pleading the Fifth and let your lawyer do the PR. Just a narcissist who can't shut his mouth. Yeah. Alec Baldwin's ego is here. Says, haven't you seen the perfect monologue, stellar performance in Glengarry Glen Ross? Because only one thing counts in life. Get them to sign on the line which is dotted. A, B, C. Always A. B, B. C, closing. Always B, closing. Always be closing. A, B, C. Yeah. It's a great scene. It's a good one. The leads? Perry Masonary says, arrest, conviction, and jail time. He is not privileged. Good comment. Soros prosecutor says, the DA is a Soros prosecutor. Is she? And most likely not charge him because he donates to liberal causes. I would be quite surprised if Alec gets charged because of the corrupt prosecutors. Note, political corruption is in the court system. That is true. There's no doubt about that. We did cover the prosecutor in that case, but I didn't see any of that Soros stuff. She ran unopposed in 2020 after a grueling primary. So she did have an aggressive Democratic primary. So there probably was funding there, but I don't know where that came from or if she has any loyalties, but certainly worth asking. Lil Mandy says, just like Alec, to blame the gun and the gun laws, not the idiot who pulled the trigger. If there had been one person from the NRA there, it wouldn't have happened, but there's a 1 trillion chance of that happening on his set. They wouldn't do that. They demonized all the gun people. Maybe a simple NRA class would have helped. Former LEO says, never heard an LEO tell a suspect to stop talking and mean it. Give them Miranda, transport them while they are yelling and trying to spit on you through the plexiglass. All I usually did was tell them, shut up. Nobody cares about what you have to say. Do they still call it excited utterances? I hope this doesn't make me look like a bad guy. Just a working guy. No, it doesn't. I've heard worse than that. No worries. Excited utterances. Yeah. So, Miranda, really the quick and dirty of when it applies, when you're in custody and you're being interrogated. Got to have both of those conditions in order for Miranda to apply. But if it does apply, or if it doesn't even apply, and you just start saying, you start uttering things excitedly, might cause some problems in your case. If that's bad information. Be Brave says, I think this interview is genuine. Baldwin looks like crap. However, he's already been coached and has learned well. Good client? I don't know. Probably not. Can't imagine he is. Well-endowed Penguin says, if Alec received a firearm safety training at any point in his career, could this be used to illustrate how he should have checked the rounds in the chamber for blanks? Arguably, yes, right? What we're talking about here is negligence. And we covered this in the prior video where we talked specifically about negligence involving firearms and that you don't need gross negligence under the involuntary manslaughter category. And so, yeah, I mean, when you talk about negligence, then the next question is, well, what is somebody's duty? What is negligent behavior? What is standard behavior? When does standard behavior fall below the line and become negligent behavior? And so part of that analysis is, does a person know about that standard? Right? Does Alec Baldwin know about firearm safety? Presumably. He's done a lot of movies with a lot of guns, I would guess. Speech Unleashed says, a few points. One, sounds like he was acting when he was delivering that. The excuse me to his wife was more like, get out of my way, you are ruining my scene. By the way, his wife is a badass. Absolutely love her. She seems more upset than he does. He said he isn't an expert on gun safety on a movie set, but somehow he believes he has enough gun knowledge to say private citizens shouldn't have guns. Lot of double standards there, Speech. No question. Alex Bold Winning says, I know it looks like I'm grinning and smiling while I'm talking about my friend's death, but I swear it's just my Botox. This won't happen again. I am training my wife to hold the camera next time. She's not as annoying. 1 in a zillion of it happening again, right? So that's Alec Baldwinning. President Trump is here making fun of Alec Baldwin. Couple others coming in. Vienticus is here, says something about him just seems fake to me. Can't put my finger on it. I kind of got that same impression, but I don't know. Sweet Potato says, taking someone to dinner doesn't mean your friends are especially close. It's called work. I've gone to many a lunch with people I wouldn't associate with outside of work. I don't know that shows particular care for her because they had dinner together. His citing of gun fact shows he's clearly done research. It seems rehearsed. That he's prompting for something to be done urgently about it feels sus. If it was an accident, why wouldn't Why would something need to be done about it and urgently? It's a good question. Little logical inconsistency there, especially if it's a 1 in a trillion thing too, right? Sweet potato. Why do you have to do anything if this is a 1 in a trillion offshoot? Also, why is his wife recording? Why are they pulled over on the highway if kids are in the car? More bad judgment. Do you think he did it on purpose? I want to hear your lawyer answer. Well, sweet potato. Part of the mysticism of this show is, I never answer anything. I'm a lawyer, and that's part of what we do. Is we always say the real answer is it depends. It just sort of depends on any particular fact. So hopefully that helps. Next question we've got. Let's Go Brandon says, if this scene was a suicide scene and he checked the rounds, would this go against him? Well, that's a good question. You're saying he would check it before he shot himself, but he wouldn't check it before he pulled it at somebody else. I see what you're saying there. But we would never know, right? Because you can't do both at the same time. One has to come before the other. Mustang Jeff says, don't we deserve to know the truth? Doesn't the possessor of the firearm bear the responsibility of what damage it can do? It's going to depend. I think a lot of people are going to be split on that question. And Monster One says, I can't believe I'm about to defend Baldwin. It's not his fault. Dummy rounds look exactly like real rounds, except they don't have powder. He was handed a gun which was supposed to contain dummy rounds. Even if he looked in the cylinder, he wouldn't know the difference. I just puked a little. Well, hang in there, Monster One. Hang in there. I might be defending him too here soon. We just like to play around with these ideas a little bit. Yeah, I mean, if he gets charged with the crime, you better believe I'll defend his butt. So it might turn into a whole little narrative change over here. Strange bedfellows. Listen, I do think that celebrities and different people of certain statures in our society, they have a different set standard of justice. But also, I believe that everybody deserves, the presumption of innocence, Alec Baldwin included, everybody included. So, that's a bigger concept, even though we can come on here and sort of dunk on Baldwin and whatever, because he's been a hypocrite and, somebody who's not even nice about it, doesn't mean that should overshadow the presumption of innocence in any way, shape, or form. So I hear what you're saying, Monster One, and we'll see what the evidence shows. Still a lot of road left on this one. The Last Villain says, the wife is annoyed because her fairy tale is effectively over. You should just start divorce proceedings now. Far too unpleasant to be married without the flash. Wife seems like she lives for the status. Probably not being fair to her, but I'm an a-hole. All right, well, there you go. That's from The Last Villain. And I think we've got one more on this segment before we jump into our final segment of the show. Says, I thought blank rounds and not dummy rounds. Yeah, so that's from F, who was responding to, I think, Monster One. Monster One was saying it was a dummy round, but not so sure that it was a dummy round. It might have been a blank round so that you could get the explosion out of the gun. But again, we don't know. More will be revealed to all of us, my friends, and hopefully stick around with the show while we dig into it here and at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, where we record this show every day, 4 p.m. Arizona time, 7 p.m. Eastern. I certainly hope to see you, and thank you, everybody, for your support. Okay, and we've got one final segment on the show today. Oh, yeah. We're getting into some vax stuff. We haven't really talked much about the vax stuff, but today's a wild day. Everything is falling apart. Okay. How do I want to start this? Yes. There's a mass exodus that's continuing well across the country as different industries are sort of systematically being evaporated. We hear today in this segment from firefighters, from people who used to work at prisons. We hear from police, and we hear from the military, all that are different industries that are slowly excommunicating very important employees, people who've been with these industries for a long period of time, all being not even thanked for their service, but just being shown the door. And so we're going to go around the country. We're going to check in with different people, firefighters, police, prison officials. We have military over at the U.S. Marine Corps. They've got a new order out that's going to be throwing out a bunch of the unvaccinated Marines, the people who are not refusing or are refusing to just sort of bend the knee and acquiesce to whatever the government tells them to do. They have a different idea for how they should be able to manage their own lives. Government unhappy about that. And so the penalty, the recourse, you're gone. You're out of here. So let's go around the country. We're going to start in New York City, as we often do. And they, at this moment in time, they are begging for volunteer firefighters. That's how dire the situation is. Daily Mail is reporting this October 31. Tommy Taylor says that close to 1/3 of FDNY staff remains unvaccinated. There's a November 1 deadline. 26 firehouses are closed. 26. New York City previously issued a statewide vaccine mandate. Now they're issuing a statewide call for volunteer firefighters. We have a picture of the email that went out across Long Island and elsewhere. De Blasio said that this all starts November 1. Announcement came from email. There were 350 potential volunteers that were asked to come back in. We're closed. We can't put out fires in New York City because de Blasio issued this mandate and everybody is leaving now. Total of 26 New York firehouses have been forced to close. Stations are closed, quote, due to no manpower. 6 of them in Manhattan, 9 in Brooklyn, 3 in Queens, 4 in Bronx, 4 in Staten Island. So all around the entire city, gone. Friday, de Blasio and FDNY Commissioner Daniel warned that the effects of the closures would endanger the lives of city residents. De Blasio announced in a tweet on Saturday that 2,300 more workers got vaccinated. And so this is what it looks like on the ground all across New York City. You can see that they're just scattered out. All these red dots are 26 different fire departments that are closed. Ladder 55, 234, ladder 17. So don't catch fire. Here's an email that also came out looking for volunteer firefighters. This was written off by Sergeant Juan C. Syston. Says, good morning all. We need to start identifying members of the service who are active volunteer firemen in both Long Island and upstate counties in anticipation of the impending shortage for FDNY due to COVID mandates. On a voluntary basis only, operations is looking to have qualified members on standby to backfill firehouses if necessary. Get back to me with the rank, years of fire service, and training qualifications. Would be very nice if they had an entire bucket, a whole group of people that were qualified. Oh, they do, but they're not that qualified. They're not de Blasio certified with his stamp of approval, so they're gone. Now, has the mandate done anything? Looking like it's pushing some of the vaccination numbers up slightly. You can see here, before the deadline, FDNY had 67%. Now they're up to 70%, so 30% of their agency. Looks like they're still not vaxxed. 84% is what the NYPD went up to. So they're still missing a significant portion of theirs. 84% over with EMS, 76% over with sanitation. So some slight increases, right? Everything looks like it's sort of trending up, but the deadline is now here. And so firefighters, thanks for your service in New York City, but you're no longer needed anymore. I mean, you're needed, but you're no longer wanted. So thanks for playing ball. And it's not just stopping there in fire with firefighters or firehouses, also spreading out to prisons. Prisons are now facing staffing shortages as well. Officers are quitting amidst COVID. This guy you can see here holding up a Texas retired Bureau of Prisons ID badge says his name is Lance Lowry, quit after 20 years as a corrections officer. Went to become a long-haul trucker instead. Couldn't take the job any longer. Watching friends and coworkers die from COVID, dwindling support from his superiors wore on him. Would have liked to stay till I was 50, but the pandemic changed that. Says that low pay, grueling nature, impact on the labor market. Officers are retiring and they're quitting in droves. While officers struggle to recruit new employees, some prison populations dropped during the pandemic have seen their numbers rising again. So prisons are gone. You know, they're all exodus happening there as well. And it's also carrying forward into the police. So it's okay if you don't have any prison guards manning the prisons because there's not going to be that many police around anymore either. Over in LA, County Sheriff Alex Villanueva warning, saying that there's going to be a mass exodus in his department, threatening the public safety, saying violent crime is already on the rise. I have repeatedly stated, he says, the dangers to public safety when 20 to 30% of my workforce is no longer available. Those dangers, they are quickly becoming a reality. We are experiencing an increase in unscheduled retirements, worker compensation claims, employees quitting, and a reduction in qualified applicants. Homicide rates in the county would continue to rise. He says, with the pandemic waning, there's no justification for this mandate. It's like putting up storm windows after the storm has passed, but they're going to continue to do that. And if they don't, there's going to be some pretty big problems. And it's looking like they've got a long way to go. Of the sheriff's 10,000 personnel, only about 4,000 are fully vaccinated. So of 10,000 sworn, 4,000 fully vaccinated. 1,600, 1,700 are not vaccinated, and another 1,300 are seeking exemption. Huge numbers. I mean, those are just big discrepancies, not even close to 100%. So major discrepancies there. 6,400 civilian employees, 4,000 are fully vaccinated, so the remainder not. Notices are being sent out to all employees. They must comply within 45 days of receiving the note. After that time, if they do not show their proof of vaccination, employees have 30 days. They get a 5-day suspension. Then they have 30 days once they return to comply. If they fail to do it after their 5-day suspension, then they're going to face notice or discipline, which probably means what? Termination. So police also. So recap, firefighters, prison officials, police. What other institutions are they just sort of systematically decimating right in front of everybody's eyes? Oh, yeah, the military. How about the Marines? They posted this back on October 23rd. Supplemental guidance for mandatory vaccine of the Marine Corps, active and reserve components. And so this is what they officially posted over at marines.mil.mil. And what you can see is the actual policy that they are now proffering forward in accordance with direction on COVID-19 vax, Secretary of Defense, and everybody else over there. This is our guidance for active duty Marines who are not fully vaccinated. If you don't have the vax, this applies to you. Marines refusing the vax, absent some sort of exception, shall be processed for administrative separation immediately, basically. Let's see. They're referencing a different order, saying this is a lawful order that all Marines receive the Pfizer-BioNTech Comirnaty vaccine as ordered. A Marine is considered to have, quote, refused the vaccine when they do not have an approved exemption per any of our other requirements. A Marine who has not been fully vaccinated is not considered worldwide deployable, shall be assigned or reassigned. Commanders or instructors are authorized to temporarily reassign unvaccinated Marines based on operational readiness. Marines refusing the vaccine shall not re-enlist or execute orders, with the exception of separation orders, right? So they are going to start the separation, and in the meantime, all of this other stuff happens. So they're going to start processing you for administrative separation, and in the meantime, all this other stuff. No re-enlistment, reassign, you're not worldwide deployable while they're processing you. It carries on. If they have refused the vaccine, may not serve in any command assignment, so if you're commander, automatically demoted. Commanders will relieve for cause unvaccinated Marines. You are now relieved, Commander. Marines separated for vaccine refusal will not be eligible for involuntary separation pay, so not getting any money on the way out. They're no longer going to be physically present, so you also have to physically leave, so pack up your stuff and get out of there. If an officer refuses, commander shall refer the case up the chain of command. And you can see the list goes on and on. Other misconduct. The withholding of disposition authority says other misconduct may include misconduct related to vaccine refusal, like failing to wear a mask when required, falsifying a vaccine record, not complying with COVID-19 testing requirements. All are misconduct now. If in doubt, commanders should consult with servicing staff, decide whether to charge them. Lastly, it says servicing personnel shall document Marines refusing the vaccine under the training order. And there you have it. So the great purge is continuing. The great exodus, the great evaporation of many of the institutions, all over mandates, because some bureaucrat somewhere just decided this was what they wanted now. And so good people who are a part of good institutions are all being just decimated. That's just a beautiful thing, isn't it? What a great country. Thanks, Joe Biden. Let's go, Brandon. Let's see what we got for questions over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Couple questions on this one, sort of a short segment. Let's see here. That was from the prior segment. Another one here from Perry Masonary says, wow, wait, you want me to volunteer but mandate me to be vaxxed? Sorry, if you want me back, respect my right to choose. And the Constitution. It's a good one, Perry Masonry. Yeah, it's like beggars can't be. You have a highly qualified group of people who want to work, but you have decided that they cannot. Be Brave says, it's heartbreaking watching good, hardworking people lose their jobs after decades of service in some cases. 6-year-old boy died on New York City fire the first night after all those firehouses closed. It's an intentional collapse of infrastructure around the world. New World Order, Great Reset. Get right with God and prepare. Probably a good idea to do both those things. Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea. You know, and it does feel like it's basically intentional at this point. They just are consistently going from one industry to another. These are all self-inflicted wounds, all of these. But they know better. They know better than everybody. All right, couple other questions here. C. Rose says, I thought Americans had a fundamental right to refuse unwanted medical treatment. I guess vaccines don't fall into that category. Can't Sliwa or Adams reverse this de Blasio nonsense when either of them are elected in New York City mayor tomorrow? Yeah, I mean, theoretically, right? I mean, all of these were de Blasio's executive orders, as far as I can tell. I don't think that any of these really were passed by the state legislature. He just kind of passed them all. So yeah, I mean, if it is just executive order, theoretically, I would think that he could just go and reverse all of it. Whether he will or not is a whole separate question. It's good to see you, C. Rose. I think you're a brand new addition to our community. I'm grateful that you're here and joining in right on the forum. Love that. Deadmau5, pronouns are dinosaur and helicopter, shared this link. Let's see what this is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Let's pull this up. Oh, here we go. Yeah, this is very, very appropriate. It says, wait, are you vaccinated? Woman is in a burning building. Firefighter is walking up the fire ladder to save her, and she has her Instagram out saying, wait, are you vaccinated? Only problem with this comment is that she doesn't have her mask on. Yeah, so, you know, the hysterics out there, they are typically bubble wrapped up everywhere they go. But yeah, very, very astute comment. Wait, are you vaccinated? These people are kind of nuts. Pronouns, dinosaur and helicopter. Love that. John Halgren says, these cities and towns didn't test these police and firefighters during the pandemic. The reason? They were afraid that too many would be put off on sick leave to quarantine. They didn't care that these people would be heading home to their families after shift. Now it's critical to vaccinate and terminate? Sorry. What person would want to serve this community? I should have been an electrician. Yeah, and that's a heartfelt comment over there from John Halgren, who is living this stuff right now, firefighter from Naperville, and is dealing with this stuff personally, right? And it's just it makes my blood boil, John. Absolutely. So hang in there, brother, and hopefully we can hear from you on Saturday on our watchingthewatchers.locals.com meetup, where hopefully John and Heather join us. We have Vanticus Prime says, this is something that may or may not be related. Whenever divides get created among people, there's usually authoritarianism driving the situation. In these situations, I find it prudent to identify what I call the SLOTLs, the SLOTLs. It's an acronym that stands for someone lower on the list. These are the people that only stick around because they serve a purpose, and usually include sycophants. Think non-Aryan soldiers in World War II Germany. When people are pushing divisions, they're going to create a hierarchy of usefulness to achieve their goals. It's a natural process. I just thought I'd bring that up for people to ruminate on in considering the question of what's next. It's a good thought there, Vanticus Prime. It is a good thought, right? And there's a lot of different ways that people are exploring the potentials for what's next, right? I think some people are just kind of sticking their head in the sand and thinking this is all transitory and it's all just going to go back to normal. I think that ship sailed a long, long time ago. The Daily Planet says voter IDs were said to be racist while Bill de Blasio was holding a vaccine passport, which is extremely racist, right? Because if you look at the vaccination rates, certain demographics are a lot less vaccinated than others. Speech Unleashed says, FYI, the Repubs have introduced Act S2846, Natural Immunity is Real Act, in both House and the Senate, which would force the feds and Biden mandates to recognize natural immunity to COVID. Currently, it doesn't. Oh, interesting, Speech Unleashed. So I'm going to have to go take a look at that. Maybe we'll read through that sometime this week if we slow down on the news. Although we got Rittenhouse basically all week. So thank you for sharing that speech. Hopefully that makes some movements. NYPD says this Halloween was the worst. The unvaccinated dressed as themselves to scare the unvaccinated. Yeah, that's a good point. You could walk around like California without a mask and you'd be the most scary person in the whole country. Like walk around Berkeley or something. Bill de Blasio says NYC is hit 90%. Cases go negative. 300 people miraculously come back from the dead. That's from Bill. Bill de Blasio has a rough time with some math and some numbers. Monster One says, since when is a prison guard low paying? Someone with his experience is probably making close to $50 an hour. That's from Monster One. I don't know what his idea of good pay is over there. Let's see. No name on this one. Says, Rob, as a small business owner, I know how difficult it is to find and train people. Training takes hours and hours over many months. I cannot imagine taking all of the knowledge and training all of these people have and releasing them. There is no way to get that time and training back. What a horrible waste of resources. It's absolutely true. Yeah. And so this comment it's like, you have kind of the humanitarian arguments that are made in this conversation all the time. You have the vaccine hysterics. Oh, they're killing people if they don't. And so it's for their own good. And these people are like dumb dogs and we have to just educate them because they're so stupid. And just like a dog does, when it defecates in the house, you punish the dog. Well, we're so smart and sophisticated that we, the vaxxed, have to punish and scold the unvaxxed because we're so much better than them and they're just so dumb. So, you have that argument, right? But it's a humanitarian argument. It's offensive, but it's like we care about lives and we care about saving the world, and everybody else who's unvaccinated is a danger and they're killing grandma. But it's sort of, it's sort of out of love if you believe that. Now you can be somebody who also says, well, it's that may be, a good bucket of Americans, but the real power structure, the people at the top, they don't give a rip about grandma. They don't care about anybody dropping dead. They care about power, money, government contracts, reshuffling election rules, doing whatever they can to solidify their power indefinitely. That's kind of I think where a lot of people get their anger and their animus, towards that sort of silo of the conversation. But on the other end, you also have the idea that, people just want to be free. You have the humanitarian argument from the other perspective. These are people that are working. They've got lives and families, and they've got food to put on the table. And so it's a humanitarian argument the other way, right? It's sort of the other side of the conversation. But you also have just the nuts and bolts business conversation that's happening here. Do you know how hard it is to just hire somebody and onboard them? Have you ever gotten a new job somewhere? It's like a month, right? Before you even feel comfortable walking into somebody's office and saying, hi, good morning, my name's Rob, right? It takes a long time just for that, not to mention all the technical skills of saving somebody's life. If you're a pulling somebody out of a burning building might take a little bit more, training on the job experience than bringing somebody in who's a retiree. What are these people thinking? It's insane. And now you've got, to train new people in, it's billions of dollars financially of just lost productivity and efficiency. Not to mention, and that's aside from the human component of this whole conversation. It's like a self-inflicted wound that they just keep digging it deeper. It's nuts. No Question says, if someone needed to email you something, how would we go about it? So send it over to robert@rrlawaz.com. Very easy. Just email me there. I do not respond to all my emails. I read all of them. They all come in. I do not respond to all of them. I apologize if I don't. I try my best, but I'm just telling you, I just don't. I'm pretty bad about that. Also with text messages. I'm just not really good at it. So that's just the deal. But yes, send it to me. I do read it. I do try to respond to people. I've scheduled many, offline conversations with people, especially if, you get sort of a priority inbox. If you are somebody who needs help with alcohol, that is always, you get priority. You always get a response. So please reach out to me if that is what that is about. Otherwise, send me an email. If it's something I can forward to somebody on my team, I'll do that also. Vienticus says, some people think natural immunity on a Vax Pass is a win. It's still an arbitrary restriction on travel. Notice how in some places a Vax Pass is called a Green Pass. What else is associated with the word green? Yeah, and do you think it's just going to be vaccine status, folks? Give me a break. That's it. They're not going to put how many miles you drive, how many vehicles you have, or how many carbo watt hours you used, or whatever is coming. It's all coming. All right, and those were great questions from our friends over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, my friends. And I appreciate everybody for all of those amazing questions and all your support over there. I want to welcome some new people who joined us over the weekend, and they did so just in time. We've got Mind Magician, who is now in the house. Welcome. We've got C. Rose, who signed up and also jumped in the chat today. Saw that. Big welcome, C. Rose. We have Hyper Spectral in the house. Aaron Caroline joined up. Dave 520, Donna B300, and Roybot all joined our amazing community, along with Ronnie Cole, French Toast, the AI Guy, Martini Junkie, Just House, a Gold Painter, all at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. $5 a month. $50 a year annually. And we've been doing a little bit more morning impromptu live streams when my mornings are free. Mondays and Tuesdays are usually tight, but they kind of free up the rest of the week. So come in and join us for our locals only live streams that take place outside of what we do here on the show. And of course, do not forget that this weekend, Saturday, November 6th, 7 to 8 p.m., we've got our monthly locals meetup taking place via Zoom, and it's a lot of fun. We all sort of get together, 30, 40 people, sometimes less, sometimes more, ebbs and flows. Sometimes people come and they stay for 5 minutes and they're like, this is dumb, and they leave. Sometimes people stay for the whole time because it's fun. And the point is, it's sort of like a clubhouse conversation where we just kind of go around, raise your hand in Zoom, take some questions, and have some good conversations. There's a couple, kind of running threads of some people sharing with us some things that are going on in their lives. And so we talk about connection, right? In this current world that we're living in, a lot of people are very disconnected. This is an easy way to just come and just meet some people. Cameras on, cameras off, pseudonyms, perfectly acceptable. Come in as Sweet Potato, I don't care. Come in as a secret FBI agent, that's fine too. We're peaceful people here. We're not insurrecting anything. So come and join us Saturday, November 6th, 7 to 8 p.m. And it's a lot of fun. And so final shout outs to our friends over on Rumble who are joining us. We got Free Appalachian in the house who is just chatting away over there. Appreciate you, Free Appalachian, along with Rob Constance over there. And so we're getting some good momentum over there on Rumble. Our friends over on Twitch, shout out to all my friends over there. I was going to play some this weekend, but I didn't do it. But I know. I'll get to it. I'll get around to it, I promise, eventually. And then, of course, over on our secret unlisted YouTube chat, to my friends Zulu Zite, we got Ronnie Cole, K Bean, as usual, all in the house over there. And let's not forget our friends on Locals. Be Brave, former LEO says, I'm out of here. Phil and Flyover says, night all. Good night to Joey Bandolero. Sweet Potato says, Twitch. Radice says he's going to have 50 sweet potatoes. Okay. And so it's a good time over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And so join us over there when we record this baby at 4 p.m. Arizona time, 7 p.m. Eastern. When we're recording, you get a secret YouTube unlisted link and you get to join in on the fun. The show premieres as soon as we're done recording and I get it edited and uploaded on YouTube. And so if you want to chat with the night crew, definitely make sure you check that out as well. And so that, my friends, is it for me. I hope everybody has a very wonderful evening, sleeps very well, because we're going to be right back here to do it all again tomorrow. And I hope to see you there. Be well, my friends. Take care. Bye-bye.